Majority Report with Sam Cedar, where every day's Casual Friday. That means Monday is Casual Monday, Tuesday, Casual Tuesday, Wednesday, Casual Hump Day, Thursday, Casual Thurs, that's what we call it, and Friday, Casual Shabbat. The Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
It is Friday, June 28th, 2019. My name is Sam Cedar. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, from the Uber blog Hullabaloo, Digby will be with us. Also on the program today, from the Uber podcast Doomed, Old Matt will be here. The original Matt. Matt Binder will be in studio, ladies and gentlemen, for the first time in ages. So much so, I had to remind him of the address.
I like that. He doesn't keep any bridges.
Nope.
Respect.
Also on the program today, Democrats finish their first debate. And Joe Biden sitting in a bathtub of ice. Meanwhile, Supreme Court gerrymander ruling is a Republican power consolidation that may continue for years and years. Meanwhile, the same Supreme Court rules that the obvious lie the Department of Justice told in support of a racist census question was in fact a lie. And Nancy Pelosi's summer surrender tour adds new dates. Meanwhile, the Fed tees up our next capital crisis. Supreme Court will review DACA with a 2020 ruling. And Trump in Tokyo jokes with Pootie Poot over election interference. House passes a election security bill package, which will undoubtedly die in the Senate. And Matt Gaetz files charges in Milkshake Gate. All this and more on today's program. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. We're all a little bit tired. We 2 nights of debate coverage gets a little bit tiring. People stay awake, and that's it.
I just noticed Matt's giant Red Bull that he's drinking.
Yeah, I was up till 4:30 a.m. last night working on some leads. So
I didn't know they made them that large.
He's focusing on ideas.
I like the way I like share with people.
Talking trash on my girl Marianne.
Oh yeah, well that was just a sidebar.
Leave her alone. We're gonna have a big Marianne debate on the next TMBS. I can sense it in the works.
There was a Matt got I
got a dossier.
Got a dossier in the Majority Report secure Dropbox that we set up. It's a long process where you need to contact us through
Twitter.
Not Twitter. You got to contact us through what is it? Our Proton Mail email address and Signal, and all encrypted technology. So that we can get videos that are actually available online.
I'll just say shout out at the JD800.
There you have it. All right. Well, so obviously we're going to talk about the debate today with Digby, both the debates. And, we're flying blind here. We're just basically giving you our takes on what happened. We will know within a couple of days what the what the polling looks like. I'm not aware of any sort of instant polls, and generally those aren't terribly effective. And I am also not aware of any focus groups that anybody did.
Tulsi Gabbard won both debates. It's the number one search term in Google, MSNBC.
Well, that is the other thing.
DNC and the Bilderberg group tried to silence her, but she won the debate. She was the number one Google search term.
If you actually do talk about Google search terms, at least after the first debate, the vast majority of them were like audio failures, and it was all.
If you search, who is that chick? Does she surf war the Jews? You will find she won the debate, but you'll deny it because you're a hack.
Well, we will talk about the debates, but more importantly, was what happened, frankly, in the House. And we'll talk more about this with Digby, but here is the setup. The House Democrats passed a $4.6 billion bill that was to provide essentially humanitarian aid for immigrants at the border, and to increase the quality of the centers, to put restrictions on the centers, to put restrictions on the administration. The bill, well, at least parts of it, were drafted by a member of the House who has previously served as, I think, in an NGO capacity, writing human rights bills. And this was drafted. It was Raul Ruiz of California, who was a medical doctor who trained in refugee assistance at Harvard, drafted the humanitarian standards. Who had said that merely increasing funding for medical care, shelter, and other needs would not be enough when Justice Department lawyer argued in court that Customs and Border Protection may not be required to provide soap and toothbrushes for children in custody. In other words, money's just not going to do it because of the way that these people perceive what is okay, what kind of squalor it's okay for kids to be living in, and what kind of supervision, what kind of responsibility the United States have when we are detaining children, right? I mean, you open up a daycare center and you take the kids in, there is some requirement that we have in terms of the way the kids are treated. And apparently the Department of Justice doesn't feel that we need to do this with these children. So the bill passed. It heads to the Senate. Of course, Mitch McConnell completely ignores the bill. Rewrites another one that doesn't involve any of those protections, that expands enforcement money for ICE. And that bill passes with significant Democratic support in the Senate. I think about probably half the caucus, maybe a little bit more, because Chuck Schumer is a garbage leader of the Democrats in the Senate. Completely missing in action. You remember Chuck Schumer? Chuck Schumer is ostensibly the leader of the Democrats in the country. Arguably, it's Nancy Pelosi, but Chuck Schumer is in the Senate, and he is the leader of the Democrats in the Senate. And you haven't heard his word because the last big bill he had was a bipartisan bill that he had rolled out to strengthen essentially the do not call registry. I'm not being facetious about that. And so he basically must have given a pass to everybody in the Senate to vote on this piece of garbage bill. And when it came back to the House, the 25 members of the Get Stuff Done caucus, the so-called moderates, apparently Nancy Pelosi felt that she was going to cater to them, completely caved, did not even negotiate anything on the bill, and passed the bill in the House. And by passed it, I mean this. It was with a majority of Republicans. She's the Speaker of the House. There's nothing going to get to the floor that she doesn't want to get to the floor. She did so ostensibly because Mike Pence had given her assurances, private assurances, in other words, worthless assurances, that the administration would abide by some of the restrictions she had sought. They included a requirement to notify lawmakers within 24 hours after the death of a migrant child in government custody, and a 90-day time limit on children spending time in temporary intake facilities. So it is trust without verify in terms of this administration. Of course, why wouldn't anybody trust this administration? Right? I mean, it is just bizarre. And
or even if they do notify us, like, the kids are still dead.
Yes.
It's like Natasha Leonard said in the foreword to her new book, democracy dies in darkness. It also dies in broad daylight.
Yeah. And here is AOC responding to the fact that this bill was about to pass. I think this is just before it passed. And it looked like it was going to be inevitable to pass.
Abusing kids at our border, and Mitch McConnell immediately smacked it down in order to pass and ram through a Senate bill that has an enormous amount of funding for military, as well as no guardrails and no accountability for facilities that are abusing our kids. So that's the bill that's in front of us here in front of the House. However, we didn't even bother to negotiate. There are House amendments. We could have negotiated it in. We could have conferenced. We could have tried to get amendments in, to get humanitarian provisions put in, to get consequences for facilities that abuse kids in. And instead what we're doing is that we're immediately going to just saying yes to what got passed out of the Senate. And these are two completely different dynamics. The Senate, you have a minority Democratic Party there. And here we are House of Representatives, and we are a House majority, and we need to act like it.
But, Congresswoman, didn't you vote against the House version, too?
I did. And the reason that I did as well is because I understand you had Julian Castro right before. He disagreed with even the House version of the bill, as do I. I do not believe that we should more money to ICE. My district is 50% immigrant, and I have an obligation and a responsibility to protect them. I believe that really what we should ideally be doing is passing a pure humanitarian bill to get money straight to those kids. No tricks, no riders, no poison. To get toothpaste, toothbrush, soap, and we need to make sure that these kids are protected as well as having their resources funded. And the fact that this is even a game is, frankly, a huge, huge disappointment.
Well, if you oppose the Senate bill and you also oppose the House bill, I guess I'm wondering what it is that you're willing to support that could pass in either the House or the Senate.
Pause it. Let me just say, I don't know if Jake Tapper, listen, I do not too dissimilar stuff as Jake Tapper, and there are times you get distracted. But she literally just said we could pass a clean humanitarian bill. And now he wasn't listening to her, or he just wanted to pace the interview differently, or wanted to try and emphasize this notion that somehow she's being unreasonable or whatnot. But continue.
That you're willing to support that could pass in either the House or the Senate.
Right. And once again, I think that a pure humanitarian bill could pass. I do not believe that Republican voters are interested back home in preventing kids from getting toothbrushes and toothpaste. Pass just the money for these kids. In addition, if the president wanted to, he could declare an emergency right now and get that money to those kids. Because right now what he's able to do is he's able to put billions of dollars from the Pentagon, hold funds from getting dispersed in Puerto Rico in order for him to build an inanimate wall. But he will not lift a finger in the same capacity in order to get toothpaste to those kids.
Go ahead.
So I think that what we can do, there's that provision with the president, but also what we can do is pass a pure humanitarian bill. But you know what? Even if it came down to it, if it came down to brass tacks and we had to negotiate in an imperfect bill with House amendments, that at least is better than the situation that we have right now.
So there's a lot of people on the left in the caucus that are really pissed about this. I mean, being extremely vocal about it. And they should be, because you're holding up stuff for a very small minority in the House. And it's almost impossible to imagine. And I'm sorry. These people ran in these districts, and they may or may not know them. They obviously know them better than people who don't live in those districts. But it's very hard to believe that a bill that provides more humanitarian protections for children, in the wake of the photo of that dead girl and her father, in the wake of the stories of these babies, it's really hard to imagine that these 25 some odd so-called moderates would be endangered in their districts if these amendments were added. Here's just a couple of the quotes from some of the leading Democrats in the House that are not part of the leadership, although the leadership was split, and largely on generational lines, as far as I can tell. Hoyer, Clyburn, Bustos all supported the bill. The so-called second tier of leaders, Hakeem Jeffries, who's this guy is not that far to the left by any stretch of the imagination. Ben Ray Lujan, Catherine Clark, they all voted no. Mark Pocan, who is the chairman of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, the co-chair, I guess, with Jayapal, said of the Problem Solvers Caucus, which is the 23 Democrats, moderate Democrats, and 23 moderate Republicans, so-called, tweeted out, "Since when did the Problem Solvers Caucus become the Child Abuse Caucus?" Apparently, Max Rose, who's from Staten Island, did not appreciate that. He said, "That's why everybody hates this place." I got news for him.
Wham,
it's
Max.
Not.
Maybe it's the
why
child
is
abuse.
Yeah,
is
exactly.
why everybody hates this place, Max.
Pramila Jayapal said she blames the Senate Democrats first and foremost for putting us in this position, which is a very, very fair assessment. It is extremely difficult for the House Democrats to vote down a bill that has gotten almost total majority of Democrats in the Senate. She said, Jayapal said, "I'm looking for a new pharmaceutical drug that builds spines."
Yeah. Nice.
Or develops a conscience.
Yeah.
Recognizes the child abuse is unacceptable. Jared Nadler voted no. Just honorable mention for an older member of the caucus.
I was just talking specifically the leadership, but
I guess isn't he chair?
Well, he's chair of the House Judiciary, but I'm talking like literally the people who have specific positions in leadership. And obviously like Clyburn and Hoyer are going to vote with Pelosi, I guess, in this instance. Although it's just sort of shocking, and certainly a decent amount of those votes were there just to basically make it appear like it's not as brutal of a loss as it is, but it was. We will talk more about that with Digby. In the meantime, one of today's sponsors is Skillshare. Anyone who goes to skl.sh, Majority Report 4 is going to get 2 whole months of totally free access to Skillshare's entire library, super quality online courses and tutorials. Skillshare, as you know, is a vibrant online learning community. It offers courses on everything from design to video editing, photography, business, technology, cooking, meditation, everything in between. There are Skillshare courses for everyone. You're going to have no problem finding courses that are going to be useful to you in both your personal and professional life. Whether you want to sharpen your skills with something you already love doing, or you want to learn how to do something totally new, Skillshare has you covered. They have courses for entrepreneurs, courses on computer coding, web development, personal nutrition, learning new languages, Photoshop, you name it. I have already picked out the classes I'm going to be watching during our brief July 4th hiatus. Where are they? Wait a second. Here we go. Think Like a Chef, a beginner's guide to cooking with confidence. Productivity masterclass, create a custom system that works. I'm also going to do the real productivity, create your ideal week. That's the way I do this. I'm going to be doing that, what do you call it, dreaming thing? I can't find that. Lucid dreaming. Lucid. But I'm doing all the productivity ones, getting all the tips. It's going to be a new Sam a week and a half from now.
Oh, boy.
Yep. Watch out. And I'm not going to tolerate the lack of productivity in this office.
My mother was reading me a report on the Social Security actuarial table, and then we were in the Sahara Desert.
You lucid dreaming.
Oh, I see.
See? Not being productive. I'm not joking about that happening. That's obviously not going to happen. But the lucid dreaming will happen. That'll be interesting.
You can get 2 entire months free of access to every single course offered by Skillshare by going to skl.sh/Majority Report 4. Just think of everything you're going to have at your fingertips for 2 whole months. Again, that's skl.sh/Majority Report 4. I put a link in this underneath the video. Put a link in the description of the podcast. Check it out. All right, quick break. When we come back, Digby. That brings back a lot of memories. My college days. The Cure, ladies and gentlemen. Folks, speaking of a song that brings back a lot of memories, this one reminds me that it's probably Friday.
Are you ready for some Digby?
There you go. Not a hugely complex song now that I think about it, but
it ain't Beethoven.
It's not Beethoven. Heather Parton, Digby, welcome to the program. It is Friday. We are in the wake of the first 2 debates. Or I should say the 2 first debates of the Democratic primary. I want to get to that in a moment. I also want to talk about these Supreme Court rulings. Super important, probably more important than anything else during the week. But somewhere in between there was not just the bill that passed in the House, but the way that it did, or I should say that passed and will, I think, be signed by Donald Trump. But the way that it did, I just went through the whole thing with this funding bill, but I want to get your take on it. Like, this seems to me like I don't understand what the hell Nancy Pelosi is doing.
Well, in normal circumstances, I would assume that what had happened, and from what I've read, and as far as I can sort of sort through the details of what was going on with this, that she had been negotiating with the White House And they had been, kind of going back and forth on finding some way to at least put some of these House supplementals into the final bill. She was kind of doing a reconciliation sort of negotiation with the White House. But when the Senate came and voted, it was something like 83 to 8 or something. With all these Democrats voting for the Senate bill that didn't have these House supplementals, it kind of cut the legs out from under her negotiation in the House for the final bill, because that gave the blue dogs, the moderates who were, chomping at the bit apparently to, I don't know why. I mean, it wasn't like there was any. They weren't doing it out of some sense that, we've got to get something done for those kids. It was more like, I don't want to take a chance on voting for something that seems like it isn't Republican enough. But whatever that dynamic was, it seems as though that sort of cut the legs out from under what she was trying to do. Now, maybe that's been from her office, and I'm just sort of getting that because they're trying to, cover for her.
Right.
But whatever happened, what it did show was that, Pelosi's hold on the caucus on an issue like this is tenuous. And the problem is that the power, as usual, is in the hands of these moderates who are, for whatever reason, decided to flex their muscles on this particular bill and show that they had the ability, and this has always been true of Blue Dogs, all of you who are listening, I'm sure, who've been listening and reading this stuff for years, this is how that dynamic works, is that they threaten to go with the Republicans. And, that is always a problem. This is the first time we've seen that kind of a split sort of shown obviously in the House. And it's disturbing, mainly because it's about, helping these kids at the border. I mean, that's really what this bill was designed to do. And the fact that they chose this as, it's actually quite typical, sort of holding the lives and well-being of a bunch of vulnerable people over the heads of the liberals, and saying, look, well, you want to do nothing, or are you going to do it our way, which is the way that seems to work. If you go back to the health care bills and various other things, you can see that same dynamic at work. And it was disturbing, and I don't know whether or not it was the fact that, Pelosi just, they were in a big rush. They needed to get this done, and there was some reason to believe they do need to push more money to the border for sure. But this was a very disturbing kind of portent, I'm afraid, of maybe what we're going to start to see happening again. We've seen it before, and we'll see if it happens again.
So Pramila Jayapal singled out the Senate Democrats, as far as I can tell.
Rightfully so.
Yeah. How is nobody from Pelosi's office doing that? Like, I mean, if that story that she got completely undercut by the Senate is correct, how is it that there's no complaints out of her office? Like, I mean, there's one of two things that happened here, right? I mean, it's either Chuck Schumer was the one who basically screwed her over, right? Because it is very difficult to hold your caucus when the Democrats in the Senate all abandon you, essentially. And now maybe they just want to get home for the holidays or whatever it is. I mean, I honestly, it's like, I've got 4 days. I'm going to go out there. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's because there's so many of them that are running for president that they all, I mean, honestly, like that, I need this time, but to go and campaign. But this is really messed up because I just don't get it. Like, here's what I don't get. I understand, I don't agree with it, but I understand, like, I can wrap my head around the idea of we need to be passing bills. We need to be showing the American public that we're going to fight for them legislatively, and we don't have time for impeachment. And that's why we need to do this stuff. I understand that, I don't agree that it's the right course, but I understand it seems like a fairly logical argument to make. But they're not doing that. They're doing less than nothing.
Well, and particularly since, look, this bill is it wasn't a symbolic bill.
Right.
This was one of the few things that was actually going to have some immediate effect on human beings. And you could have made the case And, again, this is like not wanting to confront Trump, right? Because the reason that what the progressives in the House wanted and what Pelosi was apparently negotiating for was a set of accountability measures to ensure that the administration fulfilled its purpose in what this money was being used for, and that it was being held accountable, through various methods of inspections and various things like that. It really wasn't that big of a deal. It was oversight, right? Essentially it was congressional oversight saying, look, we got to take some action here to ensure that this money is going to be used properly because look what you've been doing. Now, if you want some symbolism, fighting for that seems to me it would have been a really brilliant move, right? Get up, make speeches and say, yes, we want to help those kids at the border, but we can't just throw money at Donald Trump. We know what he does with it, and they've not been, we need to get some accountability in here and make sure that those kids are taken care of. That would have been a good argument for them holding up the bill, in my view, because it fits with the whole panoply of accountability issues with this president. But see, this is where the weakness is that, and I can't help but look at this. Just if you're somebody who doesn't follow politics and you don't know Pelosi and her caucus and the various, factions dueling with one another, et cetera, what you see is Democrats were afraid to go up against Donald Trump. That's what you see. And you can't, there's that feeling in the pit of my stomach that all of this behavior on the part of the Democrats, the fear that they seem to have. Sure, they'll get up in front of the camera and shake their fists, but when it comes to actually doing something, impeachment or, certain, or a bill like this or whatever, using the power that they have to educate the American public about what's going on, they just hold back every time. And that looks like weakness. It is weakness, and people can smell that, I just think that this is not what people sent the Democrats to Washington to do last fall. It was to stand up in situations like this and oppose Donald Trump. Right. They wanted to see them do that. And, and look, there are progressives out there willing to go in and take the fire, too. They would have been standing up there saying this stuff. The moderates, if they wanted to hold back and not say anything, the people would have said, okay. But when it came to doing the debate on this and to actually, voting and getting up and taking a stand, that's what people want. At least that's how I see it. This constant sort of caving in small ways and big ways on these sorts of issues where there is a case to be made that this administration is being cruel, it's being, dishonest, it's being corrupt, maybe even traitorous in some ways. They just won't, they won't really put their muscle behind it, and that's very disappointing. At least to me. Yeah,
and it's also hugely, I think, politically problematic too. Yeah. So I don't know what the answer is to it. But it is interesting to see, at the very least, to the extent that I am encouraged by anything, it is that there is a concerted effort to push back on this within the Democratic Party, which in some respects is also a relatively new phenomena. Like, this phenomena is not new. That we're witnessing here. It's just sort of shocking that they're still doing this, even with a president who is this despised, right? Has this low of favorability ratings. This move by the Democrats is not atypical. What is slightly atypical is that you're getting someone like Jayapal calling out the Senate Democrats. You're getting someone like AOC going on and taking Pelosi to task. That I think is helpful, but it really does hammer home the point that we just need a new generation of leaders. It seems to me, in the Democratic Party, and I to be honest with you, I think we're still a couple of years away from seeing those people emerge. But if it takes someone who's a freshman, to rise to the leadership, I am much more inclined these days, because for all of the prowess that we attribute to Nancy Pelosi in terms of holding her caucus together, if you can't do it in this situation, all right, well, what are you bringing to the table? And so I don't know. I just find it incredibly discouraging. And let's just, before we get to the debates, just talk about these two Supreme Court hearings. I had mentioned them last night before our debate prep, but one was the ruling on the census question, which, is it's a win to the extent that there's no. It may be revisited in some fashion, but it would have been such a huge blow to the credibility of the Supreme Court to side with the Department of Justice's explanation as to why they wanted this question on immigration, or I should say citizenship, in the census question, when we now have literally an entire documentary record of how they are lying about that. Like in some respects, you would almost want the Supreme Court, if they had the capacity, to fine the Department of Justice for contempt or something, for lying so obviously to all these courts because this information came through. But that's encouraging. But let's just talk about the gerrymandering one, because the implications of that Merrick Garland seat now are that we have at least a half a dozen states who can have situations like we have in Wisconsin, where you have 54% of the votes go to Democrats and the Republicans control 65% of the seats in the state legislature. I mean, this is just so effed up. It's unbelievable.
Well, and it's so incredibly openly partisan. I mean, like, this isn't even the argument for it, which just cracks me up. Yesterday on Twitter, there were a lot of Republicans, people like Scott Walker, that were making these excuses for this, saying, oh, well, it's perfectly fair because all the Democrats are in the cities. So that's, so they get representation for their city. And then, but there's all these other counties out here and other places where, there aren't, where the Republicans are. And I'm going, we don't have representation for rocks or for cows. That's really not what this is about. It was supposed to be that humans, actual human beings, people who live in this country, would be, represented proportionately in our government, in our government. And, they're just basically saying, yeah, we're, all the cities, they're just sort of ghettoized into these, these small districts where you get one representative, and, that's how we do it. But then we're going to allocate all this, so we're going to make sure that there are many more people represented by the Republican, the right-wing conservative Republicans who would be more likely to represent people out in the rural areas. And that's really what they're saying. And it's so blatantly undemocratic and so clearly partisan that it kind of shocks me, to be honest with you. I really didn't expect that they would do it, and I don't know why. Everybody said, they're going for it, they're going to do it. But it really is. I mean, I think that this is a signal of just how openly and blatantly partisan this court is really going to get. And, going to the census question, look, Chief Justice Roberts, apparently he was the swing vote, and he voted to send the case back, and sort of mentioned and it was mentioned in the opinion, they weren't exactly honest. They didn't exactly tell us the truth. So they, yes, they lied blatantly. But he took that position. Most of the legal scholars that I've read say, he's trying to show that the court really isn't so nakedly partisan, and it doesn't pass the smell test, because when it comes down to something truly important and consequential, this court is as far right as we've ever seen, and we're going to see more and more of this. I mean, that that the Federalist Society lawyers and the Republicans in the legal community are pushing as hard as they can to get these cases before the court. And they're going to, and look, they don't even have to hurry, because this court majority is going to be there for a long time.
It's going to be super durable. I think Thomas is going to retire he may retire in the next month or two. he may announce that, like literally days away from announcing it, or
I think he could. I think he could wait
or
and
he
retire.
could,
3 months before the election, and
Yep.
let Mitch McConnell just kind of stick it to the Democrats. Just for fun.
Yep, I think that's what they're going to do. I think that's going to be a way of engaging. They're going to put that in their back pocket as a way of engaging a lot of those Christian conservative voters who came out and voted for Trump last time, because it's going to be a reminder. It's going to there's going to be this sort of like. I think they look back at the Kavanaugh hearing and say that was helpful, and they may or may not be right about that, but I think they're thinking that was helpful, and maybe the next person we bring up there will offend the sensibilities. The questioning by the Dems will offend the sensibilities enough of people, and it'll bring more people out to vote. So I suspect,
right.
He's going to resign probably this time next year. And McConnell may just wait until August to start the hearings, so that this is fresh in people's minds. Let me just say that, though, on the gerrymander thing, the idea, like the argument that they're making about we should have areas represented. I mean, I think there's something to that insofar as we have states that are represented, right? That theoretically have different regions that may have different types of problems. But the argument is just shown to be BS when you have these different types of regions. The rural parts of Wisconsin, let's say, are overruling what can happen in the cities.
Right.
It cuts both ways. If you could say these individuals are being denied Republican, in all of these rural sections of the state, which is, I think, not quite correct. But even if that was, that's not the way that state legislatures work. They dictate over the cities, or they let me put it this way: their purview is beyond the local geography that they inhabit. So it's just, at the end of the day, it's all about numbers. I mean, I
right, and on a national level, let's not forget. I mean, all these states get 2 senators. California gets the same number of senators as Alaska, and we have 30 times the population. I mean, it's insane. So, this is, there is that sort of, on the national level, there is that kind of enhanced representation for underrepresented areas, say. So, I mean, not that has anything to do with the House, but there is this other House in the U.S. Congress that sort of makes up for it.
I also find it hilarious that he is arguing that Walker does that doesn't mean they should have a larger share of the seats just because they win big by big margins in some districts. Well, the reason why they're winning by such big margins in a lot of these districts is because they've been drawn in such a way to corral as many Democratic votes in as specific of a location as possible. That is exactly the plan with the gerrymandering. And we should say that one of these cases that are that was in front of the Supreme Court, I think it was North Carolina, those districts were literally drawn by the same guy who came up with the plan to put the question on the census. That guy Hofstadter.
Right.
And so it would have made it that much more embarrassing, I think, for the Supreme Court to do it now. And I guess I don't know. I'm of two minds on that, because it would have been nice to rip the Band-Aid off and to sort of stop with this pretense that the Supreme Court is anything other than completely politicized and partisan. And this thin veneer that basically, keeps any sort of dramatic reform at bay or calls for it, I think is really I mean, I think that's part of I think that's what Robert's, I think, thinking is in this. But all right, let's talk about the debates. We had 2 debates. You want to start with the first of the first debates or the second of the first debates? Or should we look at them both together?
Let's look at the whole thing, I think, it's I mean, we can do it however you want. It's your show.
Yeah, no, I mean, let's look at the whole thing, but let's just start with this before we get to sort of the horse racy stuff, which is sort of inevitable when you have 20 some odd people running in this race. And before we talk about, Marianne Williamson or whatever, I don't know. Mm-hmm. From a policy perspective, right? Like just from the, like how much, because people like you and I are always looking for the policies to be discussed, for there to be a vigorous debate about the policies. I feel like there was too many people involved to achieve like an opportunity for people to learn things. But my sense is that I'm also super excited because I feel like almost every single person on the stage would have been to the left of at least the major candidates in 2008.
There's no doubt about it. There's just no doubt about it. I mean, I had exactly the same feeling. You're right. You can't really get deep into policy. And even then, debate. You and I want to see that, but I'm not sure that the rest of America wants, deep, in-depth discussions of details of policy beyond what you would find in a normal town hall, say. So I don't know if we're not going to get the Lincoln Douglas debates. Let's just put it that way. But I do think that these things are generally, they're sort of they give you a sense of where the party is, especially with this big group. In the beginning, you're sort of looking at it. I mean, I found that when I was watching the Republican debates too in 2016. That you get a sense of where the party is, what their general sort of where the center of gravity is at any given time. And for many years, you and I watched this. We watched them tack more and more and more to the right. And in fact, there was an interesting article in the New York Times this week where they had mapped it. It's called the Manifesto Project, if anybody hasn't had a chance to look at it. And you can map how the right went right over the last 20 years and how the Democrats chased them right. It's mapped. You can see it's scientifically designed to study. And then in 2008, it halted the move to the right, and it started tacking left. And of course, it's since then has picked up speed. Now, what is interesting here and important to note is that when they mapped out where the public was on any number of issues and various data points that they used, the Democrats are still. They're left and they're center left. They're not way left. They're not, so far. I mean, they compared them to other parties in Europe, for instance, the left wing and the right wing parties. The right is still way off, on the edge. The Democrats are still, they're very much within the mainstream. I guess that's what I'm saying. But what we can sense in 2008 is the right period to be looking at, 2008 until now. That the party has been tacking back rather than chasing the Republicans and trying to, just sort of fudge the differences and, shave off a few points on either end or whatever. And in the old days, you could see where that the party was trying to do that. They're not trying to do that as much as they were. And it kind of goes back to our earlier conversation that I think maybe the leadership of the House is kind of still in that mode. Yeah. And not recognizing that the center of gravity of the party and the mainstream of America, which, by the way, the mainstream stayed pretty static. It's not really, it's always been this certain, but, it's just been that the right was so dominant in their in their rhetoric and in their
their intensity.
It certainly dominated the media.
I mean, in the intensity, right? I mean, this has always been the big story of American politics, as far as I can tell. It is that the right is far more engaged. And it's, people talk about like there's 80% desire for gun control, but the intensity of that 80% is low. And the intensity of the, small percentage who don't want any gun control is super high. And so, I mean, I just point that out only because so many people have a mistaken perspective on what drives politics. And, to the extent that people like you and I in particular are accused of preaching to the choir, here's the dirty secret. It's the choir that moves stuff in this country. And it just so happens that the Republican choir is bigger. It's not that they're, getting the disengaged. It's just that there's just more of them who are more engaged.
Well, and that's true, and I think there's a chicken or the egg kind of question on this too, because they have a leadership that actively seeks to give them what they want, whereas the Democrats for the last 25 years spent most of their energy trying to separate themselves from their own base and saying, hey, everybody, don't pay any attention to those crazy people out there, people like you and me. And that does tend to disillusion your voters. I mean, it certainly doesn't feed their intensity if that's what you're looking for. So, so in any case, I think you're getting back to the debate. I certainly feel that the center of gravity in the Democratic Party is much further, I shouldn't say much further left. It is substantially left of where it was in 2008. And there are certain people within the party who are running, big names with a lot of active followers, the Sanders and Harris and Sanders and Warren, for instance, who, have a very strong, they're holding down the left end of the dial there. That this is, you can tell that something has happened to the Democratic Party. Now, you still see all these voices, a lot of the never Trumpers and various other moderate voices are saying, oh no, this is terrible, look, they're going to blow it and Donald Trump's going to win. Well, I don't know about you, but I think it's time to have this contest. I really do. I think it's time to actually put the ideas that the Democrats actually believe in, put them on the table. Let's see what happens. I mean, this is, there is no guarantee that tacking to the right or being, very overly concerned with whether or not you appear to be too left is going to beat Donald Trump. Nobody knows what's going to beat Donald Trump. He is an alien from outer space in the political world. And all these people, including the never-Trumpers, go, look, I've won a lot of races. Let me tell you how to win. Yeah, well, we saw what happened in 2016 in their party. I'm not listening to them. And the Democrats, look, we are in a different place than we've been with Donald Trump. Donald Trump is something unique. And I'm not talking about their ideology or anything. I'm just talking about him as a candidate. So Democrats, there's nothing to go on here other than just, let's just go out there and tell the people what we believe in. We'll tell them what we think about Donald Trump. We'll, put it all out there on display and try to win. I don't think there's any other way to do it because nobody knows. You can't strategize this and try and, be too tactical and, try and figure out where we can pick up a couple of votes over here and let's just, pick off these. They can try it. I don't think it works in the age of Donald Trump.
Well,
I mean, maybe it will again
let's
someday.
be honest.
I don't think now.
I don't know when it has worked.
Well, true. Yeah.
I mean,
exactly.
when was the last time a Democratic nominee who was perceived to be the right person to win, but that was why they were nominated, won? There was genuine enthusiasm for all his limitations, but there was genuine enthusiasm for Barack Obama. It wasn't like this is the guy who can win. In fact, if you were to sit down and do the calculation on paper, you would say this is not the guy who can win. You would have picked Joe Biden maybe or John Kerry or Michael Dukakis. I mean I don't know that strategy ever works. And there's no reason. And like you say, in an era of Trump, I think it's even less workable. I mean, there needs to be, I think, just a sense of confidence. Sense of confidence,
exactly.
And that you are not running from anything, that you're not equivocating. What you're offering is what you believe in rather than what you think. Because half those people who walk off that stage, I'm thinking like the Hickenloopers or the Bennetts or the Delaney's, their argument against half of the things that are talked about is like, you can't get that done in blankety blank place. Well, of course, they don't know that. But it's also just sort of a lame way of backing into something. It really, and there's no evidence that is effective. You got Claire McCaskill on MSNBC, telling the Democrats how to win. Newsflash, she lost. She lost. And, so like, this is how you run in the state? Really? Well, then why didn't you do it? Why did you fail? And I don't know. But I think that I mean, I watched this thing and I'm impressed insofar as
Me too.
Where the party has come. And I think that is, largely a function of Bernie Sanders, frankly. And, I think there's a lot of other factors. He was the one who just sort of stepped into that role. I think Elizabeth Warren could have stepped into that role in 2016. And I think in many respects, Sanders was waiting for her to do that. And on some level, I think he is, in some ways, it is hurting his bid on some level, because it is not as easy to look at those, two debates and distinguish between him and the other people. I mean, I think that if you are more sensitive to the policies, you can see it more clearly, in most circumstances. But for a relatively casual observer, or even not even that casual, I think it's sort of hard to say like there's huge amounts of daylight here.
Well, I don't think there is, and I think that Sanders, and you're right. Of course, he deserves tremendous credit for that. He was the standard bearer, and we're talking about going way back. Not just even before 2016. And just to add to it, I think there are a couple of other factors too that should be given a little credit. One is I think that Occupy Wall Street
without
during that was a gigantic, especially on the generational level. I think if you were growing up during the mid 2000s to the late 2000s, and that's you saw that that was a spontaneous movement. It was global, and I'm not sure that they accomplished anything specific, but what they did was an awakening, an epiphany, a collective epiphany.
They put income inequality into the lexicon, into the national discourse. I mean, there's no doubt. Bernie Sanders was, in many ways, inherited something. He had always been calling for it, but he inherited, and I think it's a function of Occupy Wall Street. I think it's a function of, frankly, having a generational thing where you have
the spirit for the netroots.
And the netroots. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that conspired to this, but he just happened to be the one who became the national figure talking about these things at that time. And I think there's also sort of some marginal differences that, are more or less important to different people in terms of like where he stands in terms of a critique of capitalism. But in terms of just basically, the broad strokes, which is, I think, how most people digest a debate like this, it's harder for him to stick out. So let's talk about, with that said, and I would have liked to have seen more talk about free college and climate change during these debates, and sort of having an opportunity to sort of for people to have like laid out a bigger vision. Like everything got very small, very quick, it felt like, in both those debates. And maybe that is the sort of the danger of having, it's part of it is having that many people on stage at the same time. But if you had Fox, let's say, do that debate instead of MSNBC, they would have just come out and like, how can you justify government? And then people would have had an opportunity to sort of like start with the sort of broader proclamations of, why arguing, why government's good. But there's going to be plenty more debates. So let's just get a sense of what you think, how the race is going to change following these two first debates. Give me your sense of what sort of, I guess, the headlines are in that respect.
I was a little surprised at how poorly Joe Biden did in the second debate. I had expected him to be a little bit. I mean, he's
really.
Joe Biden.
Were you really surprised?
Yeah, I did. Well, I was. I thought that he would be. I didn't think he'd get nailed quite as hard as he did. I think it was a very bad showing for him, but I'm not sure it'll make that much difference. I don't know. He's still the front runner, and we'll see. But I think it exposed on some level something about him, which is, number one, he's just not. He's he hasn't kept up. Let's just be kind about it and put it that way. He's just kind of not of the moment, and I think that it showed really, for the first time. I think maybe the whole country could see that. Wow, he's lost a step here, and I don't mean that in the ageist sense. I just mean that he has clearly not taken the time to fully assess and understand where the party is right now, what the morals and mores are of the Democratic Party, and he had just assumed that he was going to be crowned here, I think.
Right, because he's an arrogant a-hole, right? I mean, that's what comes across.
And
it's
he
like
always
he's so
has been,
arrogant.
by the way.
Yes.
Nothing new.
But this fits into the narrative where he starts to see, like, more than anything else, that bragging about being friends with the segregationists was just sort of like completely the arrogance and the sort of like shocking lack of empathy and the shocking lack of awareness. I understand why he may have done that in the moment. Like, even if he didn't have some issues, problems in terms of race, I can understand why any politician in that era would have done that. But to look back on it in retrospect and not go, to express some like ambivalence about it, but to use it, like I can see saying like, 30 years ago, I had to cavort with people who today I don't even think I could even shake their hands. Like,
exactly.
To say something like that, even if it was insincere, even if he didn't believe it, would at least have an awareness of like, hey, things in terms of race have progressed, and it's no longer even remotely acceptable to.
He could have celebrated it, right?
Yeah.
I was the vice president to the first black president, and let me tell you, when I started out, I had to hang around with some people and work with them that you wouldn't even believe. They were in the Democratic Party even, and this is what we had to do just to make the slightest amount of progress, and look how far we've come. That doesn't even exist in our party anymore. I mean, he could have turned it into a positive for himself, and instead, he's proud of this, and what this speaks to is this delusion on his part, and I think he truly believes it, that if he becomes president, he can go in and cajole Mitch McConnell and whoever into doing his bidding, because they'll all be buddies. They've known each other for years, and this is just the worst fallacy. I mean, I thought the Obama administration believed that in the beginning, and they were schooled hardcore over the first term, and they wised up. By the second term, they understood what they were dealing with. Where was Joe? Did he not see any of that? I mean, did he just think that was just? I mean, what happened there? Was he asleep? I don't get it.
Ryan Grimm has a great piece in The Intercept. I think is excerpted from his book, or at least based upon the research he did from his book about the fiscal cliff and how Biden went around Harry Reid. Harry Reid had wanted to go over the cliff because. I know you remember this, but people may not remember that the Bush tax cuts had to sunset within 10 years because they were passed through reconciliation. So this fiscal cliff basically was like, if the Democrats do nothing, if they basically went home for vacation at the end of the year, then all of the Bush tax cuts would have been rescinded. It would middle-class given the Democrats all the power. They could come back if they wanted to institute middle-class tax cuts. They could have done that. They could have owned that. And the power position, like, you couldn't possibly ask for a better situation in terms of where you get it, because you didn't have to do anything. It was a runaway train, and you could just sit there and say, like, if the Republicans don't want to stop this train, that's fine, because it's going to stop. It's just going to stop at the spot we want it to stop, and then we're going to leverage that and get what we want, and the Republicans have to go around. And Joe Biden stepped in, and I don't know if it's ideological or just sort of like some type of ego thing or just some type of notion like, I'm going to own this. I'm going to give them. I mean, it's like literally like somebody comes up to you and goes like, I want to buy that bicycle of yours. And you say, okay, $80. And they go, I don't know. And Joe Biden goes, I'll resolve this. I'm a good negotiator. You could have the bike for $40. And they go, great. And he comes, I see that. It's called deal making. I mean,
does that remind you of? I mean, and I hate to say this because it's not really fair to Joe Biden because he's not like Donald Trump, but I got to say that I see way too many parallels.
There is an arrogance and there is a mindset that I think is anachronistic now, and I think that's the idea is that we can beat Donald Trump with Donald Trump light.
Yeah. Yeah, well, again, we're talking about that idea that we just need to appeal to some of those Trump voters, and look, there are Trump voters you can appeal to. In fact, I wrote a piece this week about the Never Trumpers, and I'm not a Never Trump basher, a Never Trumper basher. I tend to sort of enjoy some of them. They're very, clever and often have a lot of great insults for Donald Trump. So, I'm not one to say, hey, don't join us because of all the horrible stuff you did before.
Like me.
My feeling
I'm
is,
sort of a little bit like that.
I know, but my feeling is, bring them on board. We'll work with them. This is us. We're gonna ally with Stalin here, and then after it's all over, we'll we'll go back to our
right.
and we'll revisit all this. But in any case, that's beside the point. What they've been saying, is that you just can't you can't be all left wing or whatever. And I'm going, look, you people don't understand. There is one group that may be gettable for the Democrats, and they're only gettable on one level, which is that they are appalled by Donald Trump's assault on the Constitution and political norms. They're not gettable on policy. Come on, they're Republicans. They're gettable on that. And the Never Trumpers have an argument to make to those people that Donald Trump is sui generis, right? He's somebody who is doing this in a way that nobody has done before, but many will do after him if they're allowed to get away with it. This goes to impeachment and various investigations, oversight, all that stuff. They have that argument to make. That's where those people are, and those people are those suburban white women and college-educated Republicans who are gettable. They're not gettable on policy. So you can talk about all this. They've got their own issues there with they love the tax cuts, they love all the crap that Trump does. But if they think he's destroying the Constitution, they may be gettable. But that's not an argument that is going to be easily made by Democrats. That's something these Never Trump people can make, and maybe they could put their talents to better use, let's say, than giving Democrats advice on what policies they should have,
right?
To appeal to Republicans. And this is sort of, this is again, shaving off on the edges. This idea that we just do a little bit of tweaking here with this policy, and let's not go too far left because that'll offend the Republicans. That's not how this is going to work. I don't think. I think that we're just in a whole new world, and the politicians with the best instincts will win. And I'm telling you, I don't think that Joe Biden has them.
I agree.
I don't think they're there. And there were some others who came out, I think that shone in the debates that kind of gave themselves an opportunity for a second look. Like obviously Harris did very well last night. She was very aggressive with Biden, which I think sort of showed people, these are all kind of beauty contests, right? There's only there's too many people. So what you want to see is sort of a sign of character or cleverness or some ability to sort of seize the spotlight or whatever. It's theater, right? More than politics. And she was very, very good at the theater and showed, I think, which is something that a lot of people are longing to see, is somebody who is has the political ability, perhaps, to go up against Donald Trump. And in this kind of situation, I think that she did show that. She showed that she has a talent for it. And we've seen it before. She did it in the hearings.
Yep.
With Bill Barr, so she's good at that, and that will stand her in good stead going forward. I thought she was really effective, and of course, I personally, my own, and I am saying this to everybody, just my biases are right out here on my sleeve. I adore Elizabeth Warren. I have for many, many years. She's been a major favorite of mine. So I was, very happy to see her do well in the first debate.
Yeah, I thought she did well. What else? Harris and Warren, I think Bernie did okay. I don't know that he won any new converts. I don't know that I suspect that it doesn't impact him much either way, but he probably gains on some level to the extent that Joe Biden loses.
Right.
Who else? Anybody else that you think is going to be that did well, that's going to get any more attention?
Surprisingly, I thought that Kirsten Gillibrand did well. I mean, she's been a cipher in this race so far, but last night she sort of pushed her way into the debate, and it wasn't so much her delivery or the theater of her, but I thought she said some things that were pretty effective. I don't know if anybody heard it because no one was really paying attention to her. I thought she was pretty good, and I thought that Pete Buttigieg, he's not someone on policy that I'm particularly attracted to at the moment, but he's a gifted, rhetorical speaker. I mean, he's really, really good, and I expect that we're going to see more of him.
Yeah, he's sort of scares me a little bit.
Yeah, me too. But I'm just saying he's talented.
Yes, I think that is yes. The reality is you cannot deny this guy has skills. And that's what's so scary about him in many respects. But all right, well, Heather, thank you so much. Have a great week. Have a great Fourth, and we'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, Sam. Thanks
Bye-bye.
for having me.
All right, folks, we're going to take a very quick break, and then in studio, we have no music, but it'll be Old Matt will be joining us. Of course, new Matt is here, so I don't know if maybe what will happen is they'll cancel each other out.
There can only be one. It's like Highlander.
It's like...
there's a lot more than one Matt.
Matter and antimatter.
There's a lot there, I think.
I'm tired, folks. So tired. All right, so give us 1 minute, and when we come back, Matt Binder will be here.
If I wanted to sell out to my audience or whatever that is, I would not even know which way that meant. All I can do is do what I think is right. When you have that kind of plurality of support, I can't, I've said this many times, but if I was to try to sell out, I genuinely wouldn't know which way to sell. No. Truly, I mean, that is really the truth. But so all I can do is what I think is right.
Yes, and I...
And that's more of an ethical argument than an economic one, I think you would agree.
I would have to look at I suppose in this case I'm making the ethical argument, which I think if things were more done on the grounds of ethics, than sort of staring at numbers and projecting things, and the CBO, which projects things for 20 years and is always wrong about everything, or all the pundits who project things are always wrong, and all the polls that are always wrong. I think doing some things based on ethical principles might actually have some more long-term positive benefits to society.
One of the upsides of listening to the show is that you get to hear the interstitials, and now Matt has new Matt has gone back to his roots, which was, what was the name of your podcast when you first came? Informationer, which was taking tapes, Nixon tapes, maybe some LBJ tapes, and putting mood music underneath it. And I remember you coming in for your interview saying, yeah, I did this to get my friends to listen to these tapes. And I thought, well, maybe we have found, because there's two things I look, to replace people who've gone. One is like skill set, and then the other is someone who has the same name. That way I don't have to learn the new person's name. And so when you came in and told me about yourself, I was impressed with your skill set, but I was really sold because I was so used to saying Matt around the office that I wasn't going to have to change. And with us now is the reason why I developed that habit. That is Matt Binder.
Well, hello.
Matt Binder, welcome back.
Oh, it's great to be back. It's only taken, how many years? Yeah, 4 years.
Matt, is good way you land your opening.
Right.
Like that.
Yeah.
Wait, has it been 4 years?
It's been 4 years since I've been gone from the show. I was a guest on the show early last year for like a 10-minute segment where I just called in. But other than that, I have not been on this show since the last day I worked here, back in October of 2015.
That's nuts. Someone...
It's a tough deal.
What's funny is like I had a doctor's appointment yesterday, and he told me like I'm coming up close on my colonoscopy. And I'm like, no, we just had that, because I remember sitting here complaining with you guys about my health insurance coverage on my colonoscopy, and I realized like, wait, that was 4 years ago?
Right.
Yeah. Feels very recent.
I hate to quote Mike Cernovich, but time really has dilated.
If you're going to quote him properly.
Right. So, Matt, what have you been doing? You've been basically creating spawns?
Yeah, I've got... Well, when I left here, I had one kid.
Right.
And now I have two.
Wow.
Ooh.
Now, how did that happen?
Well, the way these things usually work, I don't know if you quite know.
You take Ambien, and then what?
Right. That's part of it, I guess, if you're not me.
Right. Now, Matt, of course, is straight edge.
I am still straight edge, right.
Wow.
In fact, when I came in here and someone said, whoa, Matt, look at that Red Bull you have, I said to myself, I was like, I don't have a Red Bull. And then I realized it was... this Matt, because I'm the one who usually had the energy drink in this studio.
Wait, can you not drink Red Bull?
Oh, I can.
Oh, okay. I was about to say.
No, I'm saying that I thought...
got it.
Okay. Michael, a little bit slow still, I said.
Maybe you drank the Red Bull because you were hungover?
Well, it's that. No, I just literally, that's what I need for...
That's his only vice.
Yeah.
It's breakfast.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, caffeine and whatever else is in there.
Well, that was the other thing, is I wanted... when I wanted to replace you, I wanted someone with the same name and the same eating habits, and we got pretty close. He has like M&Ms for breakfast.
That sounds delicious.
All right, so you've had a second child,
right?
And you went on to Cafe Media, and now you have your own show.
Right, I do. Yes,
Doomed,
right, and I'm also a reporter at Mashable.
There you go.
Right. But yeah, doomedpod.com. That's where you could listen to the audio version of the podcast, and then youtube.com/Matt Binder for the live stream version of the show.
And I assume you have a Patreon?
I have a Patreon, patreon.com/Matt Binder. Thank you, Sam. I only ask for $5 a month, much cheaper than some other shows.
Wow. All right.
Michael's reacting neutrally to that.
That was a double shot. That was me and this one.
Listen, there are people on the show who claim to be socialists, and then there are the real socialists.
Right, there you go.
Wow. Hey, look, just because you're socialist doesn't mean that you don't pay for value.
Right. All right. I'm not sure. All right.
Actually, that reminds me, because Destiny said, like, Michael Brooks is much more to the left of you. And I said, I don't know if that's the case. Do you think that's the case?
Oh, yeah, I'm to the left of you for sure.
In what areas?
In redistribution and decommodifying the economy and foreign policy. I'm to the left of you. I don't know.
Well,
I don't
maybe
know how...
in foreign policy, but what do you want to decommodify and redistribute that I would?
I mean, basically, ultimately everything, which I don't think you want to.
The show, for one.
So you want no private property?
Well, I want private property do you agree with, like, I don't mind if somebody owns, like, their own house or something like that.
I agree.
But I don't want any large corporate concentration of anything. So you're for breaking up all in all sectors? I didn't realize that.
Breaking up all in all sectors? You mean from, like, an antitrust standpoint?
No. This is another, like, making them actual public commons. Not antitrust, public
like
comments.
Get more specific with what Matt. Just hold on for a second.
All right, sure.
I
no
appreciate
problem.
you being here for
Yeah.
this.
I'm just as left wing.
No, I'm just curious
Like
because
Judge Brandeis.
I will
do you
say
see?
the line between social democrat and democratic socialism is a bit blurry.
Well, that's what I think too.
Not
but
really.
I am curious about it because it was the first time I thought. I was like, well, Jamie is anarcho-communist, and I think that's pretty definitive. But like, what like?
I
give me an
actually
example of what
dropped
you're
the
talking about.
anarcho prefix after our communization episode. They convinced me I can just be a communist now. Small c communist.
There we go. All right, but what? So
would you make as an example your interest in solving the crisis of Silicon Valley is antitrust, and I'm more interested in making these companies public utilities, as an example.
So you would make Google and Facebook public utilities?
Yes, absolutely.
How would you deal with like First Amendment questions?
They would be covered under the First Amendment. That's how I deal with it. Okay. I'm less freaked out about that than you are.
A little bit awkward
that's
now.
So
but,
I'm more. That's where I go. I'm more interested in how can things actually be democratized and moved into a commons than just broken up by old trust-busting methods.
Since leaving this show, I've become a libertarian. A little bit of a surprise, I know.
Wow,
but,
you're really angry at Sam.
And what was the other thing that you would decommodify?
I would also all natural gas and oil.
Oh, refineries! I've been on that for years.
You want to make those commons, not just like you want. Like I think the government tomorrow should go to Exxon. Yeah, okay.
I would nationalize the refineries. I've been saying that for
not just refineries. The entire company of say Exxon or Chevron needs to be publicly absorbed and then probably basically disassembled because it's incompatible with life on Earth.
Yes, I would. Yes, I have no problem with that.
I mean, I think I guess
Matt,
I would
hold on
include
for 1
foreign
second.
policy. Just relax.
I feel like Andrew Yang over here.
Yeah.
That's apt. But I think that I am. Yeah, and then if you include foreign policy, he said so left of you. Is that the quibble? I'm to the left of you. I don't know that I'm so left of you.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think the big difference. I mean, on foreign policy, I don't know. I don't. I would imagine
intention. Maybe just amount of energy put into it. Yeah.
I will say this: in this Chapo Facebook group I am in, Michael has more of the left wing credit than you do, Sam.
There's no doubt about that. I mean, he's definitely. I think he's definitely branded himself in that way. I was just curious from an actual policy level.
I will
say, two dope boys recipes.
When I first found out about the Majority Report, I was getting kind of a liberal vibe from you, Sam. And then the more I watched it, the more I realized that a lot of the differences that I had perceived between you and like Chapo were like affect.
I definitely think that.
Because Sam was like, okay, look, I support socialism, but first let me explain why Nancy Pelosi is so clever.
I think that's true.
So
I think
good
it's
at
true.
her leadership job.
So now, where are you
disagree.
now, Matt? Where are you on this, Matt Binder, old Matt?
Right.
Where have you landed? Because I cite you a lot about like the online stuff, and I know that's what you're doing with Doom. But where are you in this?
Right, I'm a Yang Gang. I'm wholly with the 4chaners and believe that I want my $1,000 a month and let the world burn. No, I probably actually.
Let the world. If you said $1,000 a month and let the world burn, you would be a lot more fun.
Now that Jamie's dropped the anarcho thing, I'm probably more along her line of thinking, to be honest.
You know,
non-anarcho?
It was a long road, but I acknowledge the need for some form of central planning, which means I'm not anarcho.
Right. I was the, to take a line from Against Me, I was a teenage anarchist. But now I've sort of, that's where I've landed. Same as Jamie there.
I have cited you multiple times, as recently as yesterday on this segment I did with Destiny, for back in the day when Saul was about to be born, or maybe it was right after he was born. I wanted to take paternity leave. That was the genesis of Matt and Michael Mondays. And I just remember you coming up to me like every, once in a while and saying, like, I want to get somebody on for men's rights activists, or this guy,
Paul Elam?
No, yeah, but what was the other guy? What was the name? I'm just talking the general name of like pickup artists. But then there's like an acronym for them too, like
PUA.
Yeah, PUAs. And I'm like, what the are you talking about? And I just remember saying, like, dude, you can do it if you want. Like, Gamergate, what? You can do it if you want, but that's not politics. And then I, talk about like, and then 3 years later, they're literally in the White House.
Right.
And that is to a large extent your beat, right? Like you on Doomed, and are you not doing public shaming anymore, are you?
Well, no, that's not going right now, but it's sort of the same thing where I go at someone on the right who deserves some shaming. We on the show we cover everything really, but the like you said, the bread and butter is what the right wing's up to, what white supremacists are doing online, what the Gamergators and the men's rights activists and the subgroup of those guys that are big now are incels. What they're all up to, and the ways they're sort of still so ingrained in everything that's going on in our politics. I do think in certain ways, some people like Cernovich have sort of lost their allure and their power that they once had. But that's just because that's happening to the sort of celebrity grifters who try to use this and buoy their own sort of career and make money off of this. But like the real true believers of these sort of groups, like, the incel, like there's been shootings literally that have happened where people have come out and committed acts of violence, and then they go online and you say, oh, they did this because they're part of the incel community and they wanted to attack women who they call Stacys because they believe that they have hurt them in their lives by not having sex with them.
Why Stacy?
It's just this dumb the muscly guys who they perceive.
Chad. How do you know about Chad and Stacey?
I didn't know. I knew about Chad because of Chad Vigorous. I didn't know about Stacey's. Okay, got it.
So they're just like basic like Barbie and Ken, but they've decided to call them Chad and Stacey. Like, what was the genesis of that? Like, how do these memes? I mean, I guess it's like basically asking like a comedian, like, how do you come up with these ideas? but do people chase these memes down to their like original origins?
Right. A lot of the times with these things, like with Gamergate, there was just one thing that happened in like the gaming community. And it just so happened that this woman was making independent games and her boyfriend broke up. She broke up with her boyfriend, and he wrote this horrible screed about her and passed that around. And in that thing, it suggested that she had cheated on him with 5 different guys in the gaming community or whatever. And that literally created this sort of anti-women right-wing reactionary backlash against all these really innocent people who did nothing wrong to have their lives upended and harassed the way they were. And that's literally what just kicks off these things. There's just a moment where like a bunch of these people get together on Reddit or on 4chan and they're like, let's do something to troll. And then that inevitably brings out people who are like, yeah, I'm trolling, but also I believe that. That's real to me. That's what's really going on. It's like the whole racist troll thing where like, I'm just, the things I'm saying, Pepe is just racist because it's funny, but also I am actually racist for real,
Well, it is interesting to sort of like all of these things basically come out of like these single acts of misogyny or racism. Right. Like, you got dumped, dude. Grow up. Right. You don't go and, it's just some type of veiled or not veiled misogyny that drives something like that. So is there a sense of, like, where are these movements relative to where they were, let's say, 3 or 4 years ago? Like, my sense is that there is a waning on some level, and I'm not. I only know that. I have no sense of if that's just because of my personal myopia or no.
Well, it's definitely been waning in certain aspects, and in other aspects, it's actually been growing. I think, to the original like groups of people who were in these different right wing groups, they sort of viewed Donald Trump as a disappointment in their eyes. However, what they've been saying has permeated through to the Trump true believers, the moms and dads, the grandpas and grandpas, the boomers who just love Donald Trump and think he's fantastic. And you see this with QAnon. How QAnon went from a 4chan/8chan meme where a bunch of people were just sharing this stuff on there to literally you have people in their 60s showing up at Trump rallies wearing "Where we go one, we go all" QAnon t-shirts.
Wait, where does that one come from? What's that? Where we go one,
that
we
is
go all?
that is literally the QAnon catchphrase.
Oh, okay. All right.
It makes complete sense, right? That sounds like very natural English.
It sounds like
right?
a super great
right
catchphrase,
right.
very dope boys tested catchphrase.
Right.
Yes.
So you see this is growing. Like you look at any Trump rally, there's QAnon shirts, QAnon signs, people saying "Where we go one, we go all." You go online, there's people who really do still believe that any moment now Mueller's about to pop out with Trump, arms around each other, saying, "We just took down the deep state together and fooled you all."
It's a joint press conference.
Right.
John Podesta's in handcuffs.
Right.
We stopped Chab on the station,
right.
folks. We did it.
Hillary, come out here.
Hillary, if you could please
we
come
have
out.
Smoked out the...
Hillary. Is there anything?
Great.
Would you like to apologize to the victims of Comet Pizza? She's part of it?
Yeah, she's part of it. I just want to say, the hardest part of this whole thing.
To be part of it?
Not a QAnon, but you know what? If that's where the storyline went, where if Q one day just came out and said that, "Oh, actually, I just got word that Hillary's part of this," they would then believe this.
I know.
I just want to say the hardest part of all of this was to lock her up. Every time I had to say that, it hurt me inside. But she was so great about it.
It's funny in Ryan Grimm's book. One of the tidbits, is that Hillary Clinton actually needed to be checked by her staff to not praise Trump for firing Comey. Which I love. Oh my God. She really wants to come out and be like, "Cosign."
All right, so let me ask you this. Is your sense that, give me a sense of how much of these movements have been hurt by essentially cutting off the heads? How much has it impacted to have the deplatforming of Alex Jones? Cernovich, bless his heart, seems to have not recovered from the defeat at the hands of me.
Right. Always going to be a little bit jealous of that one.
I mean, what happened to Cernovich, which I really think really sort of deep sixed him, was after we publicly humiliated him, and then had the opportunity to publicly humiliate him again after he failed to get me fired.
Who's laughing now, Sam?
Exactly. My recommendation would be to people who are going to troll to give it a couple more days before you really start to spike the football in those situations.
Sernovich.com.
But after he did that, I don't know if people remember this, he got rat-effed. Somebody gave him fake documents that showed that Chuck Schumer had done something wrong. And he went out there with them as basically a way, I think, of distracting from him taking this beating. And I should say, I don't think too much people paid attention to that dynamic, but with him, it's all encompassing. So I think for as far as he was concerned, his entire world was falling apart at that moment. And this was going to be his lifeline. And that fell apart. And then I think that really deep sixed him.
Right.
And now he's come back as some type of documentary filmmaker.
Right. And
sort of
he was working. His movies are on Amazon Prime and shit. Someone needs to do something about that.
Well, it's super easy to to have that happen.
All right. Actually. Well, Amazon Prime has taken down anti-vaxxer documentaries. So,
well,
so much for the tolerant left.
But,
right.
But he, I think, is Milo has fallen by the wayside.
Well, I think with that, what you
Gavin
see is
McInnes. I mean, they've
that
lost a lot.
Really good.
There's been a lot of deplatforming, and I wonder, has that impacted the movement?
Well, for the superficial people like Milo, who never really had any sort of movement behind him, it was just he went out there, said something provocative on Twitter, and got attention for it, and that's what sort of lifted him up amongst that audience. That's why when he got deplatformed, it hurt him so much. There was nothing really behind Milo. There was no one who actually supported Milo Yiannopoulos. It was just, haha, that guy owned the libs. That's great. But I think someone like Alex Jones, like, undoubtedly he got hurt by being deplatformed, but he definitely still has his audience. He definitely still has sway with that world. I mean, to me, there was nothing that showcased just how he knows how to still play the game than when Laura Loomer went on there crying about how she got banned from Facebook. And Alex Jones had to say, well, calm down, Laura. What you got to do is you got to use this in your favor.
Oh,
like
can
he
we
knew
play that video. It's so good.
Yeah, like Laura Loomer's on air, bawling, screaming, and crying, like they've ruined me, Alex. They've ruined me. My life is ruined. And Alex Jones is telling someone to calm down.
You're gonna need to think of the long term a little bit. But what about the the aspect of it where the original dynamic? Because I think you also see this in Europe a lot. Like I know Steve Bannon is not he's different than these people, but he's adjacent. And he's amazing at generating press attention. But the truth is, like, his actual particular contributions to the far right in Europe failed pretty much entirely. His parties he was most closely aligned with did poorly. But then, like, Salvini, who's basically the most powerful politician in Italy, there's this clip that went around that Axios shared that embarrass Bannon because Bannon's there like, Salvini, blah, blah. And Salvini's like an Italian. He's like, I don't really know that schmuck. I've met him once or twice. Right. And everybody's laughing. And it's like, yeah, but Salvini is literally a neo-fascist and one of the most important politicians in Europe. So, like, what is that line of like, okay, these people are less relevant, but now all of these major parties are like in their image.
Right. I mean, like Bolsonaro and...
Well, I mean, and Bolsonaro, like Trump, merges it. I mean, Bolsonaro is a foreign minister who talks about cultural Marxists.
Right. Well, last week on Doomed, we had Michael Edison Hayes of Southern Poverty Law Center's Hate Watch on the show. And he basically was...
Totally unfair group.
He basically wrote this great piece about this character in Russia, this mysterious fascist. His pseudonym is Alexander Stavros. And he basically created this neo-Nazi forum called Iron March. And they were like the legit neo-Nazis on the internet. Like this wasn't like, Stormfront or the Daily Stormer where like, they obviously are scary, but they're just a bunch of losers memeing online. They have no real power. Like Iron Watch are the people who are... They were actually the people who inspired those skull bandanas that fascists wear when they march in the streets all over the world. And that came from Iron March. And then all of a sudden, one day last year, Iron March completely falls off the internet. It wasn't deplatformed. No host came out and said we took it down because it got some sort of attention. And Stavros, this guy who led this forum, completely disappears as well. And the belief there, now no one knows for sure where this guy went and what happened, but the belief there is that he actually is the son of some sort of important Russian diplomat who found out what was going on and said, you got to cut this out. We can't have this going on. And I mean...
So somebody got sent to his room.
Right.
Without
so I think
you grounded. No internet for 10 months.
So I bring that up to basically say that. I think what you see is that, like, a lot of this...
grounding
it's a lot of just... young people who could be cut off like that. I mean, the real problem is when this stuff, as you say, when this stuff is now in the White House, is when the grown-ups listen to these kids and say, "Oh, that's a pretty good idea," and I see it's getting some attention, so let's pick it up and run with it as well.
What has happened to Breitbart? Like we don't ever mention Breitbart as a publication anymore, and I wonder if it's not like when Bannon left. There just seems to be a lack of synergy now between these movements and Breitbart, which in the election had more people were supposedly sharing Breitbart articles on Facebook than they were like the New York Times. Right. And it's interesting because all of this is Breitbartian. Breitbart used to run around arguing that politics is downstream from culture. And so they go out there, they try and create the culture. Yesterday I did an interview, another one that we're going to run soon.
He was downstream from an ambulance.
With
Sorry.
With Caleb Kane, who was the subject of that New York Times piece. And, for him it was like sort of the how-to culture. Like that's how he ended up getting sort of sucked into that alt-right world.
Right.
and self-help stuff.
You could have found that from books just as easily.
And I think that's really what a lot of it is when it comes down to it. Like, you have the true believers, the people like Stavros, who is the anonymous guy from Russia. You have your Nathan D'Amigo, who was the guy who ran all those patriot protests over in the West Coast. You have your Richard Spencers, the true believers who legitimately believe this stuff. And then you have the bulk of the audience, the bulk of that movement, which I really do believe is young men, white men, who fall into this stuff on YouTube, and they are just lost. They can't find a job, and they latch onto this shit. Now, I'm not saying that gives them a pass, but I think, there's a lot of those people who just need to be shown in the right direction.
So Marianne Williamson's good then. We need self-help for the left.
I'm a big Marianne Williamson.
I'm not even. I'm slightly being tongue-in-cheek about her, but I don't think. I actually think you can't give up the terrain of people's interest in self-improvement to the right.
Well, I just think that there's probably a little bit more. We can put a little more meat on that bone.
Look at Jordan Peterson. I mean, that's his whole shtick.
No, I agree. I mean, I'm not saying that self-help is not a good way to enter into that. I would have just gone with something a little bit less ethereal in the self-help.
I'm not a fan of that. I'm not a fan of that whole. I agree with what you're saying. I know you're a bit more of a hippy dippy than
hippy dippy. No, I mean, whatever. She didn't do herself many favors, but honestly,
she didn't do anybody many favors.
She brought up Central America in the context of immigration and reparations.
I don't think that's going to help. Actually, I think
it doesn't help. If
Julian Castro brought it up.
Did fine.
To me, actually, my
Marshall Plan.
My favorite line from her was when Buttigieg was interrupting Bernie, and she says to Buttigieg, "Just because you're young doesn't mean you don't have old ideas." And I was like, "Oh,
that's true. Totally
perfect.
True.
He is the reincarnated corpse of Hillary Clinton in the body of a gay millennial."
Right.
It's going to be just curious, I guess, to see where that Breitbart goes. If that it gets reinvigorated in the election, because it seems to me without sort of like cross-medium validation, these things have trouble building up some type of steam.
Right. I do wonder how. I mean, it definitely was a part of Breitbart's fall from grace, but I do also wonder how much. Just how I feel like every election cycle, every presidential race, there's always that one new internet news outlet that just takes off and then sort of flutters after. I mean, Huffington Post isn't maybe the greatest example, but they were huge in 2008 with Obama and Sarah Palin. And, I would argue they probably never were. They still are big, but they never really had that.
Well, they sold to AOL. Right. They got subsumed. She left. And then a lot of the people left. They started to cut back on the funding.
2016, 538, and Nathan Silver's word was gold. Anything that they put out, that's what's going to happen,
hashtag unfollow Nate Silver.
Seriously.
God, he's awful.
And P.S., shout out to Breitbart for using a really cute picture of me for all your loser readers to Christerbate to.
Okay.
Christerbate is the first time I've heard that term.
I've never heard that one either.
It won't be the last.
I don't know why it's taken this long for me to hear that, because I enjoy that term.
Right, something.
All right. So,
it's the entire
what if you had to predict what is is there a Gamergate that is like floating around out there? Is there some type of like dynamic that you can say, 6 months from now, Sam, you're going to be dealing with this stuff?
Right. I think the QAnon stuff is held for way longer than most people would have thought it did. Wow. And I don't think it's dropping off. I think it's actually just growing. I mean, I
is
think,
it like
I think the next
event?
step is literally for just Donald Trump to outright say something that literally is a direct nod of the hat to them. Like, it's just that close to it.
I thought he's done that.
He's basically not really done that. They just interpreted different things as that. Like the whole literal movement is.
Is there a hand gesture?
There's not a hand gesture.
No. That's what I feel like they need. They need a hand gesture. There needs to be like a cue. Not this thing, which is the whatever it is, the white power. But there needs to be like a cue, like someone's just going like
an extended cue.
Right.
I don't know how.
Hello.
Well, a lot of the 4chaners and the internet trolls, they've been really big fans of Andrew Yang, and they've been really. I'm not even saying directly that's his fault. It's more like anything. He's not a white supremacist.
Can I say
it's where he's fishing, though.
But Listen, it's you could directly trace that big boost in 4chan support for Andrew Yang from him going on Joe Rogan, and I hope Joe Rogan's listening.
So wait, but my question:
Joe Rogan, just having him on that podcast, grew that whole white supremacist sect that really is the large sect of the Yang Gang. I mean, I don't know how else to put it.
Is it better though? And I've done plenty of videos on both shows about not liking Andrew Yang, and I do think he's. I don't know whether it's intentional or he's oblivious when he says
he's out of his
things.
league. He doesn't know how to handle it.
He's totally out of his league. But is it better, if I'm playing devil's advocate, is it better that you migrate some of those people over to just sort of like techno-pop nonsense instead of white nationalism?
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Obviously, yes.
Like, if you're going to meme all day for your Yang bag versus Trump,
but what I said,
that's probably, I mean, that's objectively a net positive for the world over Trump.
But what I said, though, earlier about how, wanting to see the world burn and then just collect $1,000, that's a direct reference to a lot of the former Trump supporters who are now supporting Andrew Yang.
Sure.
They wanted Trump in because they wanted to see people get hurt. And now they're supporting Andrew Yang because they feel like nothing will change. People will still get hurt, but they'll get an extra $1,000 to blow on Steam or something like that. Some Twitch bucks to
Little
give their
do they
favorite.
know, will just go to their landlords anyways, unless they live with their parents. Fucking idiots.
Here's Andrew Yang doing just taking a course at the Dave Rubin U. I've noticed that conservatives often follow liberals on Twitter, but the reverse does not seem to be true. I can tell you that the only people who block me are conservatives. And conservatives block me before I even go after them.
True.
Bunch of snowflakes.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. That's why I don't follow them.
Except Dave Rubin. He hasn't blocked any of us. Props to Dave. Thank you for at least some limited courage in the battlefield of ideas.
Can I ask a question of Matt? I wanted to ask you. I've been thinking a lot about this lately. That the same sort of pool of disaffected, young, often white, downwardly mobile millennial men is feeding into the alt-right and kind of the DSA sphere as well. And what does that mean for our movement? What does that mean for trying to diversify our movement? And I've pondered this question a lot, so I'm curious what you think.
Well, it could go either way. It really just depends who they fall on online, and it's just a fact. And there's no one reason, but it's a fact that if you go on YouTube, the most politics sort of commentary and coverage you'll come across is from right-wing political commentators. It's been like that since the very beginnings of YouTube. Maybe they've just been on there long enough that just their reach and them having that one or two steps ahead of the left in that sense just basically gamed the algorithm to continue to push that stuff. YouTube certainly hasn't done very much until very recently to fight that, to sort of even the playing field there. But it's just a fact that people go online. And I keep bringing up YouTube because that's where this is mostly happening. People aren't going on Twitter and Facebook. Young people, I should say, aren't going on Twitter and Facebook and being completely swayed in one direction because there's not that rabbit hole. On Facebook, older people, yes, because on Facebook, they go on there to talk to people, find their old classmates they haven't seen in forever, and they stumble upon these conservative meme pages.
So you're like, I wonder what Jeff's up to. Oh, my God, John Podesta's raping people.
That's literally it. That's literally it.
it.
And listen, there's been studies that show, and it's funny because old people are shocked when they hear these studies because they think they're so smart. But fuck off, boomers. This is basically what studies have shown, that young people are more conscious about fake news online.
Oh, yeah.
And older people fall for stuff immediately. Older people will see breaking news from realpatriotnews.blogspot.com.ru, and they'll say, oh, this news about Hillary Clinton is absolutely true. I read it on patriotnews.blogspot.com.ru. It must be true.
I want to follow a Django Unchained strategy of law enforcement.
I mean, the reason I think is just because there is a lack of understanding of just how accessible this media is. There's a perception of it's someone built a website. to do this.
Right.
And like there's a perception that there's a bar to entry that does not exist.
Right. And this is why YouTube is more effective for young people, because on YouTube, I mean, you just see it I see it with my son Ezra. He's going to be 4 years old. He loves shows like Ryan's Toy Review.
Oh,
he connects with that
Gavin McInnes.
Gavin
How
McInnes,
did you,
yeah.
so what is going on?
Because listen, he connects with that kid who he watches. This kid's family puts up very personal videos of him playing with toys, playing with his sisters every day, and he watches these shows. We've cut back, but he watches these shows on a regular basis, and he feels like he brings up Ryan. Like, we'll go to a store, he'll see something he wants, we'll say no, and he'll say, but Ryan has it. And it's because there's that personal connection with seeing this kid in what looks like home movies, and they feel like they know this person. And that's what you're seeing with YouTube that you don't see anywhere else with young people. They're watching these right-wing, white supremacist, neo-Nazi YouTube commentators, and they're seeing them in their basement, in their bedroom, talk to them directly to their little Logitech video webcams, and they're saying for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hour streams every night, saying, the immigrants are doing this to you. The left wants to take this away from you. And they're saying, oh, I know this guy. I could trust him. Why would he stray me the wrong way? Without realizing that this guy is getting a nice check from Google AdSense for gaining a giant YouTube subscriber base for saying these things. It's like that simple.
I mean, the closest to that medium is talk radio, I think.
Right.
I mean, in many respects, because the level of the way it's ingested, the fact that it's in the background, that it almost becomes like a soundtrack for you. I mean, there are people who listen to this program and they dip in and out and they'll leave it on for 2 or 3 hours. And, our voices start to like sort of create some type of neuro implant, in their heads.
It's like it is a parasocial relationship.
Well, they also, they used to be expressed that television is a cool medium and that radio is a hot medium. And I would say that YouTube is more hot medium than cool medium.
Right.
There is not the fourth wall. Like, good talk radio, you're actually having a conversation. You're just doing all the talking, but you're having a conversation with the audience.
Right.
Television does not work that way, but YouTube does.
Right.
It's like, hey, guys.
And in fact, you can literally have that conversation.
Well, because you're also getting feedback.
Right.
That is almost like similar to the call function, right? Where in the chat, there is some dynamic that goes back and forth. Let me ask you this. Do you let Ezra do anything but watch YouTube?
He has very limited TV time, very limited screen time, the complete opposite of me. In fact, he'll go and tell his mother, Daddy's on the phone, Matt, get off the phone. Yeah. So he knows the rules, and maybe I need to listen to them a little bit more.
What's his favorite energy drink?
We don't allow him to drink that yet.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, let's go over some sound clips. I mean, lastly, let me ask you this. What do you think about YouTube and deplatforming and like the Crowder thing? Because this is obviously coming up a lot. I'm having a lot of conversations about this. Michael wants to have the U.S. government determine what is legitimate to say on YouTube, determine what is considered obscene, right? That's the idea?
Essentially, yes, sure.
So Michael wants
to have...
That's
a really, really good frame.
Well, I mean, that is...
I want to democratize these companies, yes.
I would like to have the post-U.S. government decide what can be on YouTube.
Right. I would like to have the Kurdish government authority.
I actually sort of... I sort of have the belief that I'm not going to die on this hill. If it happens, it happens. But like, I personally don't really care what happens to Alex Jones. Like, if he didn't get deplatformed, that's fine. Like, I don't think it's a negative or a positive in terms of... It's just... If he wants to be on YouTube and YouTube wants him on the platform, then that's fine. It's not the hill I'm going to die on. I'm not going to go out and defend Alex Jones if he gets deplatformed. Good too. He shouldn't be on there if that's what YouTube thinks. So that's sort of how I look at it. I think there's a benefit to having them on these platforms. I think there's a benefit to having them off of these platforms. You really get something and you give something either way. I mean, Alex Jones literally became a big joke because of a lot of his more over-the-top words that sort of became mainstreamed. If that didn't happen, back a couple of years ago, Alex Jones was literally, the Sandy Hook truther stuff. That was well before Donald Trump made him mainstream, and his his audience ate that shit up and started harassing Sandy Hook parents. Would that have happened if Alex Jones did Sandy Hook trutherism in 2017, 2018, when people were clipping Alex Jones's most ridiculous phrases and just mocking him openly? I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think it would. Maybe there would still be a certain segment of people, but it certainly would have hurt his sort of cred with his own audience in terms of the more ridiculous stuff.
Recently just got demonetized for no reason.
I need to get better on this
broader process.
I got monetized on YouTube very shortly, a couple of months ago, after months of saying sorry, we can't monetize you quite yet. I don't have a huge audience, so I'm not losing tons of money. But if I was a right winger online, if I was anyone on the right, I would come out and say that, and right-wingers from all over the spectrum, the Laura Loomers, the Mike Cernoviches, the Ben Shapiros, the Dave Rubins, the Jordan Petersons, they would be out there lifting me up, talking about he just got banned for sharing his conservative views, and tomorrow I'd wake up and have $100,000 in my Patreon, and I would have 1 million subscribers on my YouTube, and I'd be the new right-wing celebrity. But listen, I got demonetized after getting monetization, and they did not tell me why I've been demonetized. After months of being fine, giving me a couple bucks every episode, I've just been demonetized. It happened like a day or two after I had an episode where I interviewed 2 members of the Boston DSA who were spearheading the counter-protest march to that big Boston Straight Pride Parade march you probably heard about. Yeah. It went viral.
Led by Milo, right?
No, actually, it's not. Milo doesn't really have anything to do with it.
I heard he was involved.
No, they just had hired him as like the homecoming queen or whatever.
Do you guys remember Based Stickman, that guy on... Yeah.
How could we forget?
No. Right.
No.
He was this neo-Nazi guy who basically... Over in California, when there was all those Patriot prayer marches and everything, you'll remember there was all those attacks between, like, the Antifa and the right wingers over there in, like, Oregon. Basically, this guy became famous for wearing literal, like, knight's armor and bashing Antifa people with a stick. And so they started calling him Base Stickman, and he became some sort of like minor internet right-wing celebrity. And he started creating these different subgroups that were like that he led all over the country. And basically, he could no longer. I forgot exactly what it was that he did, but a court basically said he can't leave his state anymore. So these other Boston white supremacist guys took over his group and put together the Straight Pride Parade March to try to garner some sort of support for their movement without their former leader, Bay Stickman. And that's basically.
But I just think it's really interesting.
How can we arrange for a massive flood where all of us just get it all ends?
Right. See, you're getting on board with Possadism now.
But I think that Sam's going to get that.
Right. The funny thing
after a couple more years on Bumble, he'll definitely be stoked about Possadism. But I think
the funny thing about Bay Stickman though is I might be the only person on the left, not on the right, to have had the Kent State gun girl on my show. I interviewed her on the show. I got her on the show before she was Kent State gun girl. When
should be demonetized.
Back when she was just the Kent State poop diaper girl.
Oh.
She was the one who spearheaded the Turning Point USA. I don't know if you remember the diaper protest.
Wearing diapers to own the libs.
Right. So she's the one who organized that when she was going to school there.
What the hell is wrong with
And then once everyone memed it to oblivion and trashed it to hell, they basically Charlie Kirk and the Turning Point USA heads basically threw her under the bus and said we had nothing to do with it. It was all her. And so she publicly left that group and wanted to shit talk about them. So I was like, hell, I'll take anyone who's the shit talk.
By the way, if you ever write a book, meme to hell. What is it? Meme to hell and shit talk to what? That should be your book. But I mean, that's just really interesting though, because when you scratch the surface of like these big top lines of some horrible person or asshole like Alex Jones or Gavin McInnes, and you really start to look at, like, even as an example, like Zero Books having that Ben Burgess video on Ben Shapiro in Israel completely taken down. You look at a lot of videos actually on the history of apartheid getting taken down, or even fact checker videos on white supremacist lies about land reform in South Africa. And then if you broaden this out to like Facebook, they're outsourcing their stuff to DC think tanks and suppressing Telesur. So, and what's funny is that if this all starts to get shut down and these platforms just become risk averse, not only will it disproportionately hurt the left, all of the right-wing people end up still having corporate donors anyways to have their back. So we need to be a little more strategic about this.
Right, and there is a legitimate cause there to push these tech companies. I mean, beyond just push them, there's a lot more we could do. But let's just deal with where we are right now, where we are seeing that Google, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, all these different websites are actually starting to at least somewhat speak to public pressure. I mean, you have Pinterest outright making it not possible to find anti-vaxxer stuff on their website. And you're probably sitting there going, Pinterest, who gives a shit about that website? It's for Mormon moms. But exactly. That's where the anti-vaxxer community is.
What's an anti-vaxxer thing on Pinterest? What is that?
Okay, so
would put memes.
Pinterest is basically just like this image board where, like, middle-aged moms and even young millennial religious moms, it's really popular with that subset.
I used it to plan my wedding.
Yeah, stuff like that. It's very popular.
Stuff was at your wedding?
It's very, very popular.
Measles for dessert. That was the dessert.
It's very popular with women, and
with the ladies.
For them to outright do this with anti-vaxxer stuff completely cuts off the ability for people on Pinterest to share this stuff. Facebook is starting to step up in certain ways. There's a lot more they can do. They're by far aside from maybe YouTube, probably the worst offender. But YouTube basically is now doing something about the algorithm that suggests videos. And for so long, basically, you would go to watch any video on YouTube, and you'd probably have to go 1 or 2 videos in before they started saying, hey, you should watch this video that questions why Building 7 fell on 9/11. Or you should maybe question why you believe the earth is round and not flat. And, this might sound silly, but we're now seeing that, a lot of these old school conspiracy theories that have been around for years are just another gateway into these actually even more dangerous in terms of everyday sort of policy and everyday issues that brings them into the far right and the pressure that's come from these different journalists and the public and activists really starting to focus their coverage on these companies, especially in the wake of 2016, where this stuff started to really affect a major election. I think it's really showing that this works, and let me do this. And that's why I think Bernie Sanders knows what he's talking about when he basically says we have to build this movement, because you could have all the policies in the world, but look, none of these policies would have stopped YouTube from suggesting whatever fucking video they wanted in their algorithms.
Well,
but there's a movement now. I'm not saying Bernie Sanders is behind this movement, but I'm saying the idea that these movements can actually push to have things happen. And then look at Elizabeth Warren coming out and saying she wants to break these companies up. I mean, that doesn't happen in a bubble. I think this is all happening because people on the ground, whether it's journalists who said, hey, we should really start covering this stuff, or activists who wanted to start focusing on, hey, the internet is not just what happens online anymore. It's not just the internet. This is the real world now. We need to focus on this stuff. We need to talk about how it's affecting our everyday life. I think this movement behind this really brought us here.
Nazis are freaking everywhere online. I heard the other day about a knitting website community that had to kick out the Nazis. Like, really?
Right. What happened?
Let me just the policies about breaking up YouTube. I mean, and all the antitrust stuff was in the works, anticipating Hillary Clinton actually winning that election. And there was a bunch of things that you saw sort of following the election that were indicative of that, like the open markets pulling off from the 20.
With Sheryl Sandberg as Treasury, that would have still been a huge struggle.
Right. Well, no, it wouldn't have come from the Clinton administration.
No,
it would have come. Not. It would have come.
No, the policy momentum.
What I'm saying though is that you could just see
that's what they got because they were at New America. They had to leave because New America was getting Google.
I think my guess is that was anticipated, and that was something that they anticipated happening.
They went a preemptive PR move, you think?
Well, no. The idea was, I think, that there was a large movement that was largely subterranean that was anticipating Clinton getting into office and was going to simply, and I think Warren was going to lead a lot of this, was going to go straight at antitrust with such force that it would have been they would have overwhelmed. The attempt would have been to overwhelm the Clinton administration on this accord and to get targeted. The Treasury wouldn't have necessarily been the office that would have made that much of a difference. I mean, it would have been, a function of what's happening with like mid-level bureaucrats at DOJ and at the FTC. And breaking up YouTube, though, if you decoupled YouTube from Google, even at this late a date, right, should have probably been prevented in the first place. But the search function and the ad function become decoupled. You give an opportunity for other things, BitChute or whatever it is,
right.
Or Vimeo or Twitch, if they wanted to break into that. You give them basically some measure of parity when it comes to search, when it comes to dollars. And what would happen is, but all of those platforms would become less lucrative for everybody. You could go cross platforms, but being censored on one would not have the same implications, but it also wouldn't have the same implications in terms of like, I'm going to go on there to watch what toy Jimmy's playing with. And wait, who's this? Gavin McGinnis. Oh, this is fun. That wouldn't happen. Right. But all right, well, look, this is a great conversation, but we got some video to go through because we got to get out here in about 20 minutes or so. And let's do this old school with old Matt sitting in as we go over some of the videos.
We got to do Shapiro, right?
Well, let's start. Yeah, let's start with Shapiro, and then we'll go back to the debates because this is pretty great. Now, since you've left, Matt, we developed a Dropbox for encrypted information for people to leak it to us. We don't talk about it a lot because, of course, we don't want the NSA to be aware of this.
I've been ignoring Laura Poitras's emails.
Exactly. And
we don't want to hear about that shit.
There's an intricate thing that involves you got to contact us on Signal. Then we send you a Proton email address, and then we send you a fob, which you insert into your computer. And then what happens is we end up finding these YouTubes of Ben Shapiro back on with Connie Martinson on Talks Books. This is from when?
2011.
2011.
I was here then.
And you were here then. I don't know how we didn't find this at that time, but Ben Shapiro.
Because I was here then.
Yeah, right.
Ben Shapiro, exactly.
Now the job is handled with a certain degree of competence.
And where are we picking this up? From the very beginning?
Both I missed the Ben Shapiro.
Yeah. We'll take this right from this top, I think.
Okay.
I guess there was a Ben Shapiro clip I missed, both.
This is Ben Shapiro on talking about his book about how Hollywood is chock full of liberals. And really the most interesting thing I found about this was that Ben Shapiro, like everybody else who came from Breitbart, was just mad that they did not have talent enough to break into Hollywood.
And I should shout out Some More News, Cody Johnston, who initially included part of this in his recent Ben Shapiro video.
Who knew he wanted to just write a lethal weapon vehicle?
Exactly.
Yeah. By the way, Connie ends up being very cool.
Yeah.
Everybody's laughing.
She owns him before the BBC guy did.
Yes, this was the first one.
The true Hollywood story of how the left overtook your TV. Primetime propaganda.
Welcome to Connie Martinson Talks Books.
She's cool.
You watch a TV show and you start laughing. But afterwards, do you think about what maybe was said or what you've been really recommended to believe? My guest today, Ben Shapiro, has written Primetime Propaganda, the true Hollywood story of how the left has made our country, took over your TV. And it's published by Harper.
I love how she wings this.
Welcome, Ben.
Thanks so much for having me.
She's already laughing at him. I guess one has to think about things we've laughed at. But you seem to pinpoint the authors of those shows as being liberal Jews.
Well, not all of them. I mean, Susan Harris is not Jewish. There are plenty.
Nor is Gary Marshall.
Nor is Gary Marshall. I certainly don't say that all of them are Jewish.
Well,
There's of course a lot of Jews in Hollywood, but that's because there are a lot of Jews at the top of any industry. Jews happen to be very hardworking.
Pause it. Can we just pause it for 1 second? Seriously.
I don't like where this is going.
Wow, this is...
Yeah, if you actually set aside protocols of the elders of Zion, actually had a lot of legitimate ideas about Jewish work out there.
Jews work very hard. Right.
Jews happen to be very hardworking.
No. It isn't just that. They have a point of view that can be considered comic and humorous.
That's true. I mean, there's a unique brand of Jewish humor, and that's been true since the beginning. I mean, go back to your show of shows. Everybody in that writer's room is a New York Jew. And that's good. I mean, this is good stuff.
Stop writing
this
our
is not a
coattails,
rip on
Ben
Jews.
Shapiro.
I mean, that would be ridiculous. The point, and by the way,
But
one of the points I make in the book
yeah.
is that the people who write TV are incredibly talented. That they have a political agenda, but they're very talented.
Well, let me say, I've yet to know of too many conservatives, which is where you put yourself, who are funny. I mean, it has to do with a humor that is transferable to
This is the best.
everyday
This
living.
is the best.
I mean, I utterly disagree with that. I think there can be conservatives who are funny. Liberals may not find them funny.
All right.
I mean, okay, Ann Coulter for conservatives is funny. Okay, for liberals, she's not funny. Bill Maher for liberals, hilarious. For conservatives, not funny. Okay, there's
Well, that depends because you're using politics as the form of their humor. But
Bill Cosby is relatively conservative
today.
That's true.
Yeah, and no, even back then. That's the idea that conservatism is inherently unfunny is not true. It's that conservatives have abandoned the playing field of humor and narrative. I'll agree with you there. I think that they've totally run away from that.
So many.
You got to pull that. Conservatives have abandoned the playing field of comedy and humor.
Well, there's so many young comedians you read, they were obsessed with the classics, with Pryor, with Carlin, with staying up all night watching vintage Saturday Night Live. But then they were like, I'm not going to go into it, though, because I'm going to cede the battlefield comedy in the culture war.
Well, I got to say this.
That's totally the upshot of a passion for comedy.
Back when I was starting out as a stand-up, you'd hear a lot of guys and women who would come in, and you'd be late night at Catch a Rising Star in the basement of some place in Cambridge, and people would say like, I don't know. I feel like maybe I should just abandon the battlefield.
Did you ever say it to yourself, Sam? You're like, I don't even want to do this, but this is a vital part of the battlefield.
Did you ever say it to yourself?
I would say things to myself like, I feel like I want to get a job where I can get a consistent income, and then I was like, but I can't take the tent down in the encampment I've created on this battle.
Going AWOL from the battle of humor.
Who will do Gen X Andy Kaufman jokes that promote the leftist agenda?
Exactly. That actually was probably what I was saying. But go ahead.
Is not true. It's that conservatives have abandoned the playing field of humor and narrative. I'll agree with you there. I think that they've totally run away from the battle. But that doesn't mean that there's not the capacity within conservative thought to be funny.
You talk about having conceived of the plot for a TV series and worked with Lenny Goldberg.
Mm-hmm.
Was that a comedy? Was it sitcom? Was it drama?
It was more of a dramedy. It was based on Harvard Law School. It was a dramedy. I've written a couple comedies, kind of hour-long dramedies for spec script.
And have they been bought?
No, because and there are a couple of reasons for that. One is that it's hard to sell anything in this town.
Yeah, thank you.
Period. Regardless of political viewpoint. And the other is that, and especially a breakout series right from the get-go, right? I mean, it's hard to sell a spec script. You start as a baby writer. I mean, you know the process.
Yeah. Have you worked continually with Leonard Goldberg since?
Yeah, I worked with him for several months afterward, and then he got sidetracked with Unknown and with Blue Bloods on CBS and all of that.
I just want to understand the frame that he's there. He was working on me on all these failures, and then he got sidetracked because he got a job on a series. That was the sidetrack. He actually got hired as a professional writer, and I was not, and so he got sidetracked. He lost sense of the. He, in many respects, went AWOL in the war. He ceded the battlefield.
Is that like how
retreated to a paid job in writing drama?
He ceded the narrative by getting a full-time job at a prestigious show.
Is that like how Maron got sidetracked after Break Room Live?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
He got sidetracked with the podcast in his garage. That's why he was talking to Obama.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why we don't do the Break Room Live anymore.
He got sidetracked. I've had a lot of friends who have gotten so sidetracked by taking some type of big movie job or something. It's just a real shame to see that happen. where they lose their focus on me. So,
what I didn't understand is why he wanted to do that when we could have watched old clips of me on Spin City in eternity.
Break Room Live was just about to explode and be successful, and then he decided to get sidetracked by that other show that he's doing. So.
Yeah, like everything else in Hollywood, things go into development, and then they kind of get sidetracked. They go sideways for a while. So.
Well, do you think the book will help sort of open the door with him again?
That wasn't the point of the book, but, he knew what was going on with the book. It was not a hit job on Leonard Goldberg. I treat him very well in the book. In fact, most of the people in the book I treat very well for the most part. I talk about how talented and brilliant they are. I talk about how great their shows are, which they are. And that's not a bad thing. I just point out that, look, I'm a legal realist. I'm a lawyer. I went to Harvard Law School. And in law, the idea there's an idea that was promulgated by the left in the 1960s called legal realism. What it was is the idea that your politics are going to come out in your interpretation of law. That is the same thing that's true in art. Okay, your politics are going to come out in your creation and interpretation of art. And that's one of the points of the book. The people who I'm talking to are not bad people. A lot of them are not. Some of them are not even doing it purposefully. Some of them are doing it purposefully. But it's coming out in their work. And the one thing, above all, that Hollywood does right now that is utterly despicable is that they keep people who are not of their political ilk out of the business, period, end of story. I have them on tape admitting this. I have high-ranking members of the WGA. I have high-ranking members of the Caucus for Producers, Writers, and Directors. I have high-ranking members of the DGA. I have people talking about this openly and recognizing that it occurs.
Now, pause it. Now, I got to tell you that I was in show business. I wrote... I think probably off the top of my head, 8 to 10 scripts that were commissioned by every single major network that there is, some that were, and several of the cable networks. And almost the first question, you would give what they call sort of the elevator pitch, and then you would start to go into the characters as you go into these meetings. But before you would get to any of that, you would have to tell them what your voting record was.
What happened to those scripts?
They went sideways.
They went sideways. I mean, the people got sidetracked.
You know what it is. People get sidetracked.
A lot of these
sideways.
networks, AMC got very sidetracked. I had written a script for them, and then they just sort of pursued The Walking Dead. And they got sidetracked.
I would love to watch you. You know what? I would love to see you write an episode of The Walking Dead. That would be the first episode of that show I watch.
I wrote exclusively comedies, and then what I would call dramedies, which is what we call comedies that are not funny.
Yeah. You know what I love about this is that okay, I didn't read this book obviously, but you know how the Ben Shapiro we know now is does not even have a modicum of they're talented people. He's just always a dick.
Right.
And so my interpretation is that this book obviously is a plea for a job. So he's calibrating I got to get booked and talk with all the rubes and bitch about Hollywood and say that they're a bunch of unethical elitists ramming their culture down our throats, blah, blah. But at the same time, you guys are all really talented, and it would be great if I get some work in a dramedy series. Right. Maybe I wouldn't have to write these stupid fucking books I started doing when I was 12.
Again, I think
he should have written a script about being a teen conservative prodigy. And the psychosis of that would have been a fascinating, dark, disturbing comedy.
That would have hit too hard at home. And, but again, this is something, if someone like Norman Lear, Norman Lear funded the People for American Way. Had he just established a $3 to $5 million endowment to periodically hire people like Ben Shapiro, keep them from actually feeling the resent that fuels their entire new career as a conservative talker, I think we would be in much better shape. You could have saved millions of dollars of advocacy just by giving these guys a job and telling them, this is great stuff.
I barely even know what this show is, but when I first saw Andrew Breitbart, I was like, why the hell did they not just give him talk soup?
Right, exactly.
And he wouldn't be doing this. He would just be like, whoa, they caught up with Courtney Cox at the red carpet.
He's partly right, though. Art is always going to be a vehicle for ideology, and Hollywood certainly has an ideology. But of the numerous groups of people who've been kept out of Hollywood for their ideology, I'm going to guess he's not too concerned about the literal purges that happened of communists and people suspected of being communists.
No, that was cool.
She mentions that actually later in the interview. It's a good one. If you just search primetime propaganda on YouTube, it'll come up. We should do this Yang silence thing, though, too.
Yang was silenced, right.
All right, let's look at something else. Whoa. Is this right?
The microphone was actually cut.
I mean, we can analyze it.
Let's do it. This is
Marianne.
This guy has been
off,
okay. So this guy is a UBI. The Twitter. He is a UBI guy, and here is.
We need to go home soon.
Yeah. Here is yeah.
The ping pong ball between like a few people, and it's like, all right, what's going on? And there were also a few times, FYI, where I just started talking, being like, hey, I'd like to add something there, and my mic was like not on. Like it's the sort of thing where it's not like if you just start talking, like it all of a sudden like takes over the convo. It's like I was talking and like.
All right, so he's claiming Yang is claiming that he.
No, we have proof now.
Now his mic was shut down. This, of course, happens. We hear this quite a bit on this program. People say you turn down my mic. I think Michael Tracy said that.
Sargon also said that.
Sargon did.
We do have the ability to do that, but we don't.
What happens is when you're talking with somebody over Skype.
There's an auto.
But we were talking to Michael Tracy on the phone. I was just yelling.
Oh, he wasn't on Skype.
I was just loud.
Oh, you were cutting him off. Actually.
Right. Sam was just.
You were literally cutting him off.
I was saying, "Shut up."
Yeah, you weren't using a button to do it.
Stop talking. Hello.
We expose him for the fraud that he is.
Senator, 30 seconds. I disagree with both their perspectives.
I heard
Do
him.
not blame the microphone for that, homie.
That is not the microphone.
That's just lack of assertiveness.
Yeah, you have to talk until they are forced to put your microphone up because you're continuing
Well, he
to
was
talk.
talking, but you need to talk through it.
You need to talk through it. I mean, look, Christian Gillibrand did that several times and said nothing. She commandeered the floor and delivered zero value. So you just got to be belligerent.
Sorry, listen, folks, we all know how much the media likes Bernie Sanders and wouldn't cut off his mic. So they're going after Andrew Yang, you know?
Right. That was great, though. It's like they cut off. Hey, guys.
Hey,
Sam,
I tried.
He's got no one but himself to blame because if you look at the amount of minutes everyone spoke, even like Bill de Blasio and Tim Ryan each spoke for like 4.5 minutes. Andrew Yang spoke for 2.5
Bill de Blasio
minutes. That's
definitely
just sad,
knew
man.
how to get the people to pick up his mic.
But that's just sad, man. Like if you're that far down and like you're on TV for 2 hours and can't talk for more than 2.5 minutes, but everyone else spoke at the very least for 4.5 minutes, like come on, that's your fault.
If you have a world-changing idea, you should present like it.
All right, we got to get to this stuff because I got to literally go in 7-8 minutes. All right, let's do this segment where Kamala Harris basically began the beginning of the end, which this is my assessment, and it could be wrong, but again, Joe Biden is Joe Biden in this race because he is perceived as being rock solid, and here is where he's not.
We've also heard, and I'm going to now direct this at Vice President Biden, I do not believe you are a racist. And I agree with you when you commit yourself to the importance of finding common ground. But I also believe, and it's personal, and I was actually it was hurtful to hear you talk about the reputations of two United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country. And it was not only that, but you also worked with them to oppose busing. And, you know, there was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me. So I will tell you that on this subject, it cannot be an intellectual debate among Democrats. We have to take it seriously. We have to act swiftly. As Attorney General of California, I was very proud to put in place a requirement that all my special agents would wear body cameras and keep those cameras on.
Senator Harris, thank you. Vice President Biden, you have been invoked. We are going to give you a chance to respond. Vice President.
Yes. Jesus, shut up. Pause it for one second. No, pause it before we get to his response, because here he is. This is the moment, right? Where, first of all, she helps herself in this instance
a lot,
because she's basically saying, like, I'm not afraid to go at you straight on. I've done it well. I bided my time. Excuse me, and she goes at him, and you can see, Biden was doing the thing like where you do not look. That's what they tell you from a communication standpoint, but the way that she dropped that was me. It compelled him to look, which is a little bit problematic. So how do you come back at this moment? And the way that you come back at this moment is basically it's like an old improv thing. You don't deny, right? I mean, because there's nothing she said that didn't comport with everyone's understanding of what happened. But Biden chickens out.
No, he says yes, but you're a cop.
No, he chickens out. He says, no, I didn't say that. Watch what he says here.
It's a mischaracterization of my position across the board. I did not praise racist. That is not true. Number one. Number two, if we want to have this campaign litigated on who supports civil rights and whether I did or not, I'm happy to do that. I was a public defender. I didn't become a prosecutor. I came out and I left a good law firm to become a public defender when in fact my city was in flames because of the assassination of Dr. King. Number one. Number two,
now,
as the U.S.
Pause it. Now he is. First of all, he was on number two already. I don't know if you caught that. Number one was you mischaracterized me. Number two, I didn't become a prosecutor, and I'm willing to put my civil rights, Right. So, and then he comes back to number one and then goes to number two. So here he is. He's completely off track. First off, he denies what everybody heard him say.
Right.
He denied what he bragged about, and that's where he lost this. The comment about the prosecutor, there's none of his people who care that she's a prosecutor.
Right. Right.
Her people, that's what impresses them about her.
That's right.
And
it
so
was a good line, though.
I mean, it was a good line, but not for anybody who cares.
Burn Your Bus Bill loved it.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's a great line. She's a fucking.
I'm number two. As the Vice President of the United States, I work with a man who, in fact, we worked very hard to see to it we dealt with these issues in a major, major way. The fact is that in terms of busing, you would have been able to go to school the same exact way because it was a local decision made by your city council. That's fine. That's one of the things I argued for, that we should be breaking down these lines. But so the bottom line here is, look, everything I've done in my career, I ran because of civil rights. I continue to think we have to make fundamental changes in civil rights. And those civil rights, by the way, include not just only African Americans, but the LGBT community.
But Vice President Biden, do you agree today that you were wrong to oppose busing in America then?
No.
Do you agree?
I did not oppose busing in America. What I opposed is busing ordered by the Department of Education. That's what I opposed.
Well, there was a failure of states to integrate public schools in America. I was part of the second class to integrate Berkeley, California public schools almost 2 decades after Brown v. Board of Education.
Because your city council made that decision. It was a local decision.
So that's where the federal government must step in. That's why we have the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. That's why we need to pass the Equality Act. That's why we need to pass the ERA, because there are moments in history where states fail to preserve the civil rights of all people.
I have supported the ERA from the very beginning when I ran
President Biden, 30 seconds, because I want to bring other people into this.
I supported the ERA from the very beginning. I'm the guy that extended the Voting Rights Act for 25 years.
I did that
got
myself.
To the place where we got 98 out of 98 votes in the United States Senate doing it. I've also argued very strongly that we, in fact, deal with the notion of denying people access to the ballot box. I agree that everybody, once they, in fact, they should. Anyway, my time's up.
Well, now,
that was sad.
What's really bad, and we're seeing this today, and we said it last night, he is using states' rights as a defense.
So
I mean, he's using municipalities' rights as a defense. But this is exactly what the civil rights fight was about.
Barry Goldwater's 64.
It also low-key highlights how much older than her he is, right? If he was trying to deny her integration when she was a kid.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I think what's like the only path for him, and this must just be his egotism, is to just say, frankly, like, this is just no values, just political advice. I was totally wrong. I've done X, Y, and Z, and I was a senator in the 70s from Delaware, and that was politically untenable. He could totally say that, and it would be a legit thing to say.
I think he could have just said, like, look, at the time I had to do that, and today I look back on it, I have regrets.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's exactly
absolutely.
what I'm saying. You explain the political reality, the idea that you're going to, I mean, look, we'll get him, like, okay, you weren't a brave leader. You didn't have a conscience. You weren't willing to risk your neck. We already know that. What's the second step? You apologize, talk about the history, and center it to today. The third step is, it was in San Francisco, baby.
Yeah,
but other places, maybe they didn't
off.
want it. But look, I was friends with Barack. Anyways, I can't talk anymore.
He even forgot what the original reason why he brought that stuff up was.
Right.
Like, he should have said, like, look, I wanted to get to a win. And if I hadn't done that, we wouldn't have even had the busing. You wouldn't even had the opportunity to bus.
And she didn't,
which would have been a lie.
It would have been a lie.
But,
I just want everybody to remind everybody the letter that the Washington Post that he wrote to Eastland in '77 saying, "Thank you for working with me on busing." I mean, this is appalling.
No, everyone knows what it means when someone invokes states' rights.
Right.
All right. Lastly, let's do which one we play. Should we play this Cotton or Kilmeade? I thought maybe we could round it out. Yes, let's round out our week with, of course, some expert analysis of the 2020 Democrat debate night 2. They are even using that in the in their Chiron. They won't even say Democratic debate night 2. Unbelievable. Here is Fox and Friend. And what is it?
Diamond and Silk.
Diamond and Silk.
Oh,
Diamond
hell
and
yeah.
Silk. Diamond and Silk giving the analysis.
Luxury commodities.
I think on some level, Diamond, the Democrats don't want this argument for the main reason is they're the ones who gave birth to the Ku Klux Klan. It was a Republican that Abraham Lincoln's party that up into the 1960s that would push back against racism. And somehow that narrative flipped and people are forced to go back and remember what Senator Byrd.
Wait a second. We're going to play this back because he's just told you what happened with the parties, which they never want. They went a little too far. They were the party that fought back against racism until the 1960s. And somehow things flipped. So in other words, I think Kilmeade is going with the old, you don't measure a party based upon how racist they are now, but you measure about how many years in their existence they've been racist. It's, you can do it a bunch of different ways. Go ahead.
Abraham Lincoln's party that up into the 1960s that would push back against racism. And somehow that narrative flipped and people are forced to go back and remember what Senator Byrd was. And even though every road is named after him and every hallway has a plaque with his face on it.
That's an amazing...
Should we remove those plaques?
Well, also, that's number one. Number two, though, that's an amazing point because Robert Byrd was a member of the Klan, and whatever else you think of him, he apologized endlessly throughout his career. And of course, he was one of the first Senate Democrats to endorse Obama as clearly as part of his desire to make up for that. Strom Thurmond and Jesse Helms both became Republicans and were ardent racists throughout the aughts.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah, but how many years, Michael, has it been since the mid-60s? Right? It's been less than 50 years. About 50 years. But how many years before that were the Democrats racist?
Dude, it was longer. Kilmeade, game, set, match.
Boom. All right, folks. Well, that does it for this week. Matt Binder, thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. YouTube.com/Matt Binder. Patreon.com/Matt Binder.
Go check it out, folks. All right. We will see you on Monday.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bulb, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. The months drifted into years while I shifted in and out of gear, waiting for my moment to happen. I don't know how much longer I can stay in, or how much more I got to pay to play in. I know somehow